You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
This month's Centresteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic vehicles from Europe and South America and has a rotating collection of rare and unique Land Rovers. Their showroom is located in Virginia, just 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. Visit www.cwclassics.com to view their current inventory of classic vehicles. The Centresteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners. Welcome to the Centresteer Podcast, the first Land Rover podcast on the planet. Centresteer is a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners. This is podcast number 78 for September 2019. It is New Defender Review Month. And we have a podcast full of new Defender information and discussion. Thomas Enston is our guest this month. He has a lifelong association with the brand, has owned or driven over 100 Land Rovers for work and pleasure, and has seen a new Defender in the metal. He was at the same preview event that Brian Joslin, Alloy and Grit publisher, attended back in July. And that conversation is later in the podcast after brand news and our discussion of the new Defender itself. I'm your host, John Costage, here in wonderful fall-like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And joining me over Skype, I think it's also fall where you guys are, gentlemen, is Harold and Morgan.
No, it's winter here. We're in a different time zone.
Well, it's not even winter here in Vermont yet.
Have you been to Latrobe?
No, it's last winter.
Gotcha.
Thanks for your comments, follows, and likes on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and email. Thanks for your support through Patreon, donations, and merchandise sales. And you can show your support for the podcast by buying a t-shirt, sticker, and becoming a monthly supporter through Patreon. All the details are on our webpage. Oren, our listener and friend in Australia, sent us a message. He said, after listening to the last podcast, this would have been the normal podcast in August, thought the electric conversion conversation that this page would show it's already being done right here in Australia. So he sent a link to jauntmotors.com in Australia. So they're doing electric conversions already.
They do a lot of cool stuff in Australia.
Yes.
They do, for sure.
I think Dixon, who couldn't join us today because he's gallivanting across North America, he did say that it had been done in the U.S. already, but I'm thinking it was just a one-off, not like a business that's doing it on a regular basis, which I think is what Jaunt is doing in Australia.
Right. Yeah, I think they're specifically converting series Land Rovers.
Jaunt, huh? They should have called it Jolt.
Was your kid's first word Rover or Landy? Did your kid learn how to drive behind the wheel of a series or disco? Maybe your kid grew up in the backseat of your Rangy bouncing up and down on the trail or headed to a remote campsite. We want to hear these stories. Email me at messages@centresteer.com with the subject line Rover Kids. We'll schedule a call or Skype. And after we did about 3 or 4 of these so far, was a good suggestion from one of the parents that we talked to was they're going to record talking to their kid because they tried to prep them, and they were when the kid got on the call with us. Was kind of, I think, overwhelmed or too excited, and we didn't get a lot of information out of them. So if you want to record it ahead of time and then send it to us, we can also do that. I have some sample questions if that would help you to get yourself prepped. But if you're going to do that, certainly let me know. I can give you a location to put the file so we can collect it. We want to collect all these stories through the end of October, and then we're going to use them later in the year. Still haven't figured that part out yet. Once I get everything collected, we'll figure out how to use it.
Yeah, we don't know what we're doing with them yet, but we're getting them anyway.
We are getting them. We got some good stuff too. One really good story about being pulled over in a Land Rover. Events coming up. Paying attention to so much new Defender news, I didn't see all the other events going on, but the MAR is coming up, which is here at the end of the week. Hopefully you'll be able to listen to the show in time for driving to MAR, which is in Pembroke, Virginia. That's the end of the week here, October 3rd.
Or they can download it and listen to it whilst driving to MAR.
Ooh. And if you're on the West Coast of North America, found out about a new event, new to me anyways. I was hoping Dixon could be here for this. He knows about it. It's called the Sasquatch Hunt, and that's October 4th through the 6th. It's in British Columbia by the Rover Landers of British Columbia.
Wasn't that pretty much the provincial pastime in British Columbia? Hunting for Sasquatch? Isn't that like an ongoing thing?
Maybe that's where Dixon is. Maybe that's what he's doing, and he didn't want to talk about it. He's being very coy. He just said he was out and about. He was in Quebec. Didn't want to say where or why. I bet you, Harold, you're onto it. That's what he's doing. All right, well, let's get into the news then, shall we? JLR sees another month of failing sales. JLR saw a further slide in global sales in August, but was buoyed by an increase in the number of vehicles sold in China. Total global sales were over 34,000 vehicles, a decrease of 6.7% compared to August of 2018. Sales soared in China, with a 17.4% rise compared to August of last year. Despite the difficult times it's enduring, CEO Ralph Spaeth has pledged the company will return to profitability by the end of the current financial year. UK August sales were down 21.6% compared to August of last year. Other markets also saw a dip. Europe was down 1.4%. North America was down 9%. And the rest of the world overseas was down almost 25%.
So this is like the inverse of what we normally report, which is that sales are up a little bit everywhere except really off in China.
Correct. Yes.
Huh.
So the Disco Sport, which is soon to be replaced, its sales were down. Jaguar retail sales in August were 9,702 vehicles, down almost 18% year on year. And Land Rover retailed almost 24,500 vehicles, down 1.4% compared to August of last year.
I wonder if the Disco Sport is off because people are waiting for the new one.
I think so, yes. Along those lines, continuing in the business stuff, it looks like Land Rover is making some further adjustments in its business plans, and it is going to cut production at its Helwell plant on Merseyside. The Helwell plant is where the Evoque and the Disco Sport are produced, two of the company's biggest selling vehicles. So that's they're cutting some sales there, cutting production. Also, JLR is going to close plants for a week as a Brexit safeguard. So it's more than this article has more that they've done it before. This article has some more information. And a JLR plans to close its UK factories for a week in November to guard against disruption to supply chains from a possible no-deal Brexit. Spaeth said, quote, "We have to close. You can't switch it on and off. I need to make commitments to my suppliers. I need to have every part available, and I need it just in time. If I don't have a part, I don't produce a car," unquote. JLR uses about 20 million parts a day, many of them from mainland Europe, Spaeth said. Some forecasts predict a no-deal Brexit could cause transport snarl-ups at the UK border that would leave British car makers unable to function for more than a few days. Workers are still going to be paid during the shutdown. They will engage in non-production related activities such as training. Interesting to hear they have 20 million parts a day, it seems. Seems a lot.
There's a lot of parts in a new Land Rover.
There's a lot of parts in a new anything.
I think also in this article, if I remember correctly, some of the other manufacturers are either, I think one of the Japanese ones, I want to say Honda, was like 4.5 hours was their just-in-time time.
Japanese were really into that, and they've been into that longer than anybody.
Yeah, they really spearheaded that movement, and everybody else had to sort of catch up in that area. Doing the just-in-time is really, in some cases, just in time.
JLR readies production blitz. So as we said, things were looking good in China for the last month. JLR plans to launch 30 new or revamped vehicles in China in the next 2 years, seeking to build on a recent recovery in sales. JLR, owned by Tata, said the models would include imported ones as well as products built by Chery, Jaguar, Land Rover, its local joint venture. So I guess things are maybe starting to turn around finally in China, although it's only been 1 month.
In related news, Jaguar Land Rover is preparing to file at least 30 infringement lawsuits.
Now that they have a in-country partner, hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah, probably. Let's just hope it doesn't result in a lot of knockoffs.
British car industry suffers worst period of decline since 2001. The British car industry has witnessed its worst period of decline since 2001 as rising global trade tensions and Brexit uncertainty combine to provide a dire operating environment for manufacturers. UK car production was down more than 10% year on year in July and has now fallen for 14 consecutive months, according to the latest figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. The decline is now longer than the 13-month downturn downturn between October 2008 and October 2009 at the height of the global financial crisis. British car factories, which make vehicles for companies including JLR, Nissan, and Mini, produced 774,760 cars in the first 7 months of the year, almost a fifth lower than the same time last year. David Hawes, I believe, I lost where the guy's name is, but he's quoted as saying, I think he's with that automotive manufacturing group, said, quote, "The sector is overwhelmingly reliant on exports and the global headwinds are strong with escalating trade tensions, softening demand, and significant technological change," unquote. So just a little insight into the British car industry. It's not just JLR having issues. Aren't they the largest manufacturer of vehicles in the UK?
They might be. Economic conditions are affecting all of them, not just JLR.
JLR CEO speaks the truth about EVs. This is from CarBuzz. CarBuzz, then they quoting Autocar. Autocar spoke with Ralph Spaeth, and he blamed the price of batteries for the higher costs. He believes it'll take another 5 years for battery prices to drop and in turn for EV prices to go down. Another issue Spaeth mentioned that requires serious attention is charging infrastructure. If there are more available charging stations, then EV drivers will have less range anxiety. In turn, automakers won't have to use such large and expensive batteries. I think we'd heard that before, but it's good to see that all kind of condensed into one place.
It is good that they called it the truth, because that is the truth.
Been the truth for 100 years. Electric vehicles were around 100 years ago, but they had the same problems. Batteries were expensive and they didn't last, and it took forever to recharge them, etc.
Speaking of EV sales, they've surged in the UK, even though overall vehicle sales are down. UK registrations fell 1.6% in August to 92,573 as demand for diesels continued to fall, but there was a 378% increase in registrations of electric vehicles, according to the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. Sale of diesel vehicles fell 12% last month, giving the powertrain a 26.4% market share. Gasoline was up 1% to a 63.8% market share. Full electric vehicles now have a 3.4% market share. Honda, Land Rover, BMW, and Jaguar were among brands with steep declines last month, while winners include Porsche, Audi, Volvo, and Toyota. Although I don't think that was necessarily for electric vehicles. I believe it was just sales in general. Jaguar insists it is still focused on making sedans and sports cars. Yes, I put this in here just for Harold. New Jaguar design chief Julian Thompson has said that the company remains committed to the manufacturing of sports cars and saloons and will not keep its focus on SUVs. Jaguar has applied heavy investments into the manufacturing SUVs in recent years due to high demand and strong sales. That saloon sales have been suffering might have had something to do with it, but the automakers aren't about to cease or limit production, according to Thompson. Quote, "Cars, non-SUVs, are an important market to us," unquote, he told the publication. "We now have lots of competent SUVs in our showrooms, but we need to satisfy all customers with different powertrain and body choices," unquote. Jaguar will replace the XJ with a more dramatic electric saloon that will be unveiled next year and go into full-bloom production shortly after. Per Thompson, the XE and the XF will also get replacements, but could get overhauls of their own. Quote, "It's more challenging to do standout products in the market, but Jag needs to be different and new. The world's not all turning SUV, and we will need cars. I believe that," unquote.
Finally, someone with the voice of reason.
And his name is Julian Thompson. Well, that's good. Actually, that is good to hear that they're not going to get out of the car making business completely.
Yeah, and as the car makers, as fewer cars are produced and more SUVs and trucks are produced, that leaves them in a better place in a niche market.
That's a good point. They could potentially curry all that entire market and become get market share in that area.
Well, and if they were going to go 100% SUV, there would be no point to them even existing. It's just another nameplate on a Land Rover at that point. Well, what would be the point?
In related Jaguar news, the I-Pace sales in the U.S. hit new low. Which doesn't sound good. I'm still trying to process this article. Both Morgan and I read this ahead of time, and we're still trying to process this one. But in August, Jaguar noted worrying further decrease in I-Pace sales in the U.S. to just 160 units, a new monthly low, aside from October of 2018. It is really below expectations for the 2019 World Car of the Year, which received so many accolades for its design, and recently it was also offered at significant discounts. On the other hand, the I-Pace, even its lowest, holds 7.5% of total Jaguar volume, which makes the result look far better. Not so sure I believe that part.
Yeah, I'm not so sure.
Better for the
that.
I-Pace and worse for the company, I think.
Right.
If you've only sold 160 units, and that is 7.5%, almost 10%, just making the numbers easy, of your volume.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. A closer look at JLR's plan to grow in Canada. So some actual Canadian JLR news. Jaguar Land Rover Canada will forge ahead to increase the number of dealerships despite a softening market and a buyer shift away from sedans, a company president Wolfgang Hoffmann said. At the moment, we have 25 dealerships, and by the end of 2022, we will have 32 in total. That was a plan announced in September 2017, and nothing has changed. The total market softens, and then specifically the premium market softens for various reasons. It's maybe not as easy to get credit anymore, or the housing market slowed down, or people don't feel as wealthy anymore. That puts total pressure on the total premium side. And then Hoffman continued saying it is still a very significant part of the market, passenger cars that is, especially in other parts of the world. North America is a different situation. We as a company believe there is still a place for sedans. I also believe you will see a shift and a trend in one direction, and you will at one point see a leveling off, and some people may come back to sedans. I think there's something to be said for that too. I think the sedans will make a comeback, and maybe if Jaguar is the only one making them, Jaguar will take the whole market, right?
Nothing wrong with that.
They'll at least be making all the fun ones.
They've always done a good job with sedans, so if they're the only ones making them, that wouldn't be a bad thing.
BlackBerry, Jaguar Land Rover deepen tech ties with AI agreement. JLR vehicles will include predictive software maintenance and cybersecurity threat protection, thanks to BlackBerry. And the companies did not disclose terms of the deal, which builds on an agreement reached in March of 2018 to collaborate on a new software architecture for JLR, starting with its next-generation infotainment system, which I believe we saw in the new Defender. BlackBerry will also supply consulting services and technology to help the automaker uncover security threats in software from other suppliers. I like that because it's nice to see they're worried about cybersecurity.
Agreed. Although, I know that in the automotive industry, it's a little different, but it always worries me a little bit when somebody's like, I'm going to choose BlackBerry at this time to do our technology.
I can understand. They did buy an American cybersecurity company, Cylance.
Exactly. I think it's changed significantly. They're no longer in the cell phone business. They're on enterprise. So
yes,
and automotive.
Yes, I think they are one of those tech companies that successfully pivoted to something else when they were losing.
Weren't they originally a British company?
No, I think they were always in a Canadian company.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, I believe so. They may have merged with, there was that wireless and telecom, something like that. What was the name of it? It was a British company, something wireless and telecom. They may have bought or merged with BlackBerry. Maybe
that could be what I'm thinking.
It's been years, but that's a recollection I have.
Wow. And
on a very local news story, A&L Motor Sales complete detailed service and collision centers as part of a 8.5 acre renovation. A&L Motor Sales is not far from my house. They're the local BMW, Land Rover, and Jaguar dealer. I wanted to read this because A, it's local, but B, it just shows you what is required of a dealership in the U.S. They spent 15, of course, this is a press release, so they say nice things like this achievement is part of a $15 million overall renovation of its dealership, making it an exciting milestone. But if you read between some of the lines here, it tells you what things they've done. They have a new service center, has 20 bays for BMW vehicles, high-speed garage doors, and 6-lane service drive with 4 lanes dedicated to BMW and 2 to serve Jaguar and Land Rover. They have a new collision center with multiple paint booths. Further highlights of the renovation to be completed will include updated showrooms for all 3 brands, an environmentally friendly underground storm drainage system, LED lighting, as well as cafe, lounge, and workstations for customers to enjoy while they wait for their vehicles, and which is unsaid here, to be serviced.
I wonder if the Land Rover service bays are you have to drive through the off-road demonstration area to get to them.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah, one would hope.
Well, but I guess if your vehicle can't is in like limp home mode or is having trouble moving,
I guess there would be that.
Yeah. Well,
so maybe that's the exit
There you go.
Now that's the way to do it. That's the perfect. Yep. Sir, Mr. Smith, your Land Rover's ready to go. Here's the keys. We washed it for you. You go right out to this door and you go
Here's
straight.
your keys. It's out in the middle of the pond out back.
Over the rocks, through the lily pad. Could Jaguar Land Rover join forces with BMW? JLR looks to forge a strong partnership with a German car maker over the years ahead. The first news of a tie-up was the June announcement that the two companies would work together on electric drive units for new electric vehicles. Given JLR's heavy losses for the last financial year, ongoing difficulties in the Chinese market, declining demand for diesel vehicles, and uncertainty over Brexit, some sort of partnership is inevitable. Indeed, the board of parent company Tata has made that clear. Side note, I've not heard that before. That was like dropped in the middle of this Coventry Live article. There was speculation about a PSA group takeover of the Coventry car maker, but that seems to have faded, meaning forging closer ties with BMW could prove a way forward. Formerly, Land Rover's chief engineer, Charles Tennant, also served on the board at Tata Technologies, and he had some interesting things. There's a lengthy article if you want to read this, but I'm just going to pull out this one part and trying to find it here. They talked with Tennant. Anyway, yeah, I can't find the exact quote, but he talked about them sharing information because BMW was further ahead in electric car development, and that it's clear that we're moving to electric cars, and there's some even requirements in Europe, certainly, that they're going to get rid of internal combustion engines. So this seemed like a good thing where BMW's already invested. Land Rover hasn't invested and doesn't have the money at the moment either.
Well, and I think BMW has been positioning themselves as a powertrain supplier for a number of years now. A lot of smaller companies have turned to them for power plants because it's cheaper than developing your own. It's just interesting to see them kind of come full circle, given that BMW once owned the company.
Yeah, and then kicked it to the curb.
Yeah, well, they shared the information they wanted.
Yes, we do not need you anymore.
Yeah, once they got what they wanted, they moved on. Hopefully, any future information sharing arrangements will not be like that.
Land Rover dealership set for an off-road battle. So this is Land Rover Tech 2020. It's a 2-day competition, which includes a preliminary qualifying event and a final event consisting of various off-road experiences and challenges for sales, service, and technician personnel. Land Rover says the challenges will test participants' off-road driving, navigation, and team collaboration. This year's competition will include 53 three-person teams from around the U.S. and Canada, each driving a custom 2020 Discovery SUV painted in a unique livery for the event. The winner of each wave, it does say wave, the winner of each wave will earn a spot to compete at the Trek Finals hosted in Palm Springs, California in January of 2020 using those same customized Discoveries. The Trek competition is making a comeback since it was last held in 2003 in Colorado.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're actually using customized Defenders for the final wave.
My recollection was that they weren't sure.
Gotcha.
I think they were assuming that they weren't sure if there was going to be. There's hope. I think the hope that is the case because the U.S. debut of the Defender I think is in the November LA Auto Show. I think it's in November. I don't know that they're going to have any vehicles produced though yet. There hasn't been any discussion as to when they'll actually be produced and available.
Well, I would think if they wanted to use them in the final competition, if it's that early in 2020, they'd have to pull the first ones off the line and send them over. And I doubt they'll do that.
Interesting thing about these Treks is that Lucky 8 is the one that got to kit out those 53 vehicles. And so when you see all that added kit with the winch and the A-bar and the roof rack and all that stuff, that was all done by Lucky 8.
That's a nice contract. Good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They hadn't posted anything in a long while on their Facebook page. And then all of a sudden they popped up and said, yeah, we've been busy. We got this last minute kind of contract.
Yeah, apparently they were busy.
So like, sorry, real good contract. And like, oh, what is it? Oh, we see. Oh, Land Rover called you I think it was North America called them up.
And I would think if I were in that business and LRNA called me, it's like, yeah, okay, everybody else ceases to exist at this moment.
And I think that they're one of the first ones to have done winches and front winches and such on the new Discovery 5.
You are correct.
So they've got the expertise.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they went after it in more than just a casual way. They made a point of getting one and seeing what they could do for it.
One more story before we get to the new Defender. This is the 2020 Land Rover Discovery Sport. This is a review of it. Looks like Land Rover invited journalists out to Spain, and this one is this article is from the Globe and Mail in Canada. I'll read some of it. There was some debate at Land Rover apparently as to whether the 2020 Disco Sport should be called a refreshed model or a whole new generation. After all, of the 5,000 odd parts that make up the vehicle, some 3,500 are redesigned. Paul Cleaver, chief product engineer for the SUV, said, "This is not an ordinary mid-cycle refreshment. The brief we had as a team was to get the car ready for our new electrification technologies, our mild hybrids and our plug-in hybrids. In doing so, we had to make some extremely extensive changes to the architecture, all the body structures, chassis systems, powertrain systems that underpin the body of the car. In doing that, we've taken the opportunity to improve every single attribute of the vehicle. A plug-in hybrid is planned for next year. The end of the article here, I think this is the end, says it may be officially compact, but there's room for 3 rows of seats for a total of 7. Land Rover is proud to have shoehorned these in as an option, but they probably won't be used much. 60% of Discovery Sport buyers are double income, no kids, in their 40s, while only 5% have 3 or more children, but at least there's an option. So that's the coming new Discovery Sport. Sounds like they did a lot of more work on it than a simple refresh.
Was the existing Disco Sport already the second generation, or are we still on the first?
No, I think you're right. I think that was the second generation. Then they just did a refresh.
So then this new one ought to be the Disco Sport 2A.
I didn't see that coming. I did not see that coming.
I did not either. That was good.
We're now going to talk about the new Defender. So these are all the stories we kind of collected over the last month. Following the news, and there are going to be some other stories we'll talk about.
A couple things have happened this past month.
And following all the new Defender news and a couple other stories, then we're going to have, the 3 of us are going to have our new Defender discussion. You may hear some opinions as we go through this, but this is basically here's the news and the information that has come out and the different stories we saw. This first article is from Motor Trend, and I'm going to read the whole thing because I thought it did a nice job of summarizing the review of the vehicle. Here we go. 2020 Land Rover Defender First Look Review. Next Gen Off-Road SUV revealed at last. The new Defender, codenamed L663, is built on an aluminum-intensive monocoque platform dubbed D7X. It's based on the D7U platform that underpins the Range Rover Sport, and Land Rover Discovery. But according to Nick Rogers, head of engineering, it's 95% new. Rogers says the Defender is 10 times stiffer than the average body-on-frame off-roader and 3 times stiffer than the best, and it can tow up to 8,201 pounds. Another advantage is the smooth underbody, which is good for off-roading and contributes to a drag coefficient of 0.38. D7X is built in 2 wheelbases, 101.9 inches and 119.0 inches. The shorter underpinning the 2-door Defender 90 and the longer the 4-door Defender 110. So just to refresh your memory here, the D90 is almost 102 inches wheelbase, and the 110 is 119-inch wheel. Both models have exactly the same front and rear overhangs, 33.3 inches front and 35 inches rear. So all of the 110's extra wheelbase length goes into increased interior room. The 110 will be available in a 3-row, 7-passenger configuration. Curb weights range from about 4,650 pounds for a base Defender 90 to 5,165 pounds for a loaded Defender 110 with 5+2 seating. Suspension is independent multi-link front and rear with steel springs on base models and height-adjustable air springs on higher spec versions. The suspension geometry is similar to that of the D7U Rovers, but all of the hardware has been strengthened and toughened. Base ground clearance is 8.5 inches. Defenders with air suspension can pump it up to 11.5 inches. Defender is available with 19, 20, and 22-inch alloy wheels, respectively shod with 255/65, 275/55, and 285/45 tires. The coolest wheel is the old-school steel 18-inchers fitted with high sidewall 255/70-inch tires. Regardless of the rim choice, the tire selection ensures that all deliver an off-road friendly 32.1-inch rolling diameter. U.S. market Defenders will be available with the 2-liter turbocharged 4-banger that already sees service in the Jaguar F-Pace 30T, or the new 3-liter straight 6 that has an exhaust gas-driven turbocharger, electric supercharger, and a 48-volt mild hybrid system. The 4-cylinder engine develops 296 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 995 foot-pounds of torque from 1,500 to 4,000 RPM. The 6 pumps out 395 horsepower at 5,500 RPM, 406 pound-feet of torque from 2,000 to 5,000 RPM. Land Rover claims a 7.7 second 0 to 60 acceleration time and a 119 top speed for the long wheelbase 110, powered by the 2-liter engine. The 6-cylinder engine cuts the 0 to 60 time to 5.8 seconds and boosts top speed to 129 miles per hour.
Faster than you ought to be going in a Defender. Something about that just doesn't sound smart.
Continuing, we're not likely to see the diesel engines that will be offered in Europe and other markets, but a plug-in hybrid model with the same powertrain as the PHEV Range Rover, the 296 horsepower 4-cylinder turbo motor plus a 114 horsepower electric motor, delivering a total system output of 395 horsepower, is expected 6 months to a year after launch. All Defenders come standard with terrain response controlled permanent 4-wheel drive, an 8-speed automatic transmission, and a 2-speed transfer case. An upgraded terrain response system that allows the driver to precisely configure the vehicle setting is available as an option, as is an active locking rear differential and locking center differential. Roger says, the whole goal, it had to be a stunning off-road. The Defender boasts a 38-degree approach angle, a 40-degree departure angle, and will climb a 45-degree slope. The independent suspension has 19.7 inches of wheel articulation, and the Defender will wade water 35.4 inches deep straight off the showroom floor. But Roger says its on-road manners are equally impressive thanks to highly rigid unibody construction that eliminates the need for the squishy bushings used in body-on-frame vehicles to ensure on-road refinement. Inside, the new Defender combines high-tech with functional chic. The dash is a powder-coated magnesium crossbeam framed by padded rails to which are attached a digital instrument panel for the driver and a centrally mounted infotainment interface, immediately under which is a small pod-like structure for the stubby shifter, HVAC controls, and the buttons to activate ride height, hill descent control, and low range. The pod means that in base trim there's an open space between the front seats. Options include a center console with lots of storage options or a front seat that turns even the short wheelbase Defender 90 into a genuine 6-passenger vehicle. Prices will start at $49,900 for the base Defender 110 P300 and stretch to $80,900 for the loaded 110 P400X. The volume selling models are expected to be the $53,350 Defender 110 P300S and the entry 6-cylinder model, the $62,250 110 P400 SE. There is your initial summary of the new Defender. Alloy and Grit had 20 specs you'll want to know about the 2020 Land Rover Defender. I'm not going to read them all, but just to let you know that they are out there if you want to see these. Wheelbase, overall length, approach angle, departure angle, which we talked about, ground clearance, max weighting depth, approach and departure angle, turning radius. That's the one that hadn't been mentioned before. The turning radius is in a 90 is supposed to be 37 feet. Oh, that's interesting. I think I have a typo there. Hey, Brian, you have a typo on this. Your turning circle says Defender turning radius is 37 feet. The Defender 110 turning radius is 42 inches.
Wow, that'd be cool.
Very nice.
Yes, power. And the one that I didn't see anywhere else was fuel capacity. They have here the Defender 90 is a 23.4 gallons, and the Defender 110 is 23.8 gallons, slightly large, just to have like 0.4 tenths gallon more.
Yeah, that nearly half a gallon really helps with a bigger, heavier vehicle.
And we assume that that is American gallons. But not sure.
Yeah, if the other specs are all in U.S., if it's that's from Alloy and Grit, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's a safe assumption that they're talking U.S. gallons, but
it is North America's Land Rover Journal.
Well, right, but it just one would hope that they checked that detail as they were going to print, but you never know. And
then Kelly Blue Book had a video. It's 5 minutes 20 seconds. It is a 2020 Land Rover Defender first look. And Great video. Turns out they were at the preview event in July that Brian Joslin was at, and also our guest this month from Land Rover Photoblog, Thomas, was at. And if you are keen-eyed and know what Brian Joslin looks like, you can see him for a moment in this video, especially when they're in the courtyard where the new Defenders are revealed. There's like a glass wall, and they bring the Defenders out into this courtyard, and there's all the journalists are there, and I guess other onlookers, and you can see Brian in part of that. And I liked this video because it was a 5 minutes quick overview of things, good preview for you. It was also done back in July, and the things that if you had listened to Brian's discussion about that event when he was there, you can now see some of the things he was talking about, the courtyard where the Defender was revealed. So I thought that was a nice, there's 5 minutes, nice to see, get a sense of space. So moving on with articles, Land Rover Defender Configurator is up with detailed pricing and lots of accessories. This is from Autoblog here in the US, and I like this one because it kind of has a good breakdown of the different packs, as the Land Rover calls them. The Land Rover Defender Configurator is live. The newest gate on the Expedition block takes its place at the top of the Land Rover lineup, with $12,100 between prices of the Defender and the Discovery Sport. The entry-level Defender 110 P300 with a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder starts at $49,900 before $1,025 destination charge for $50,925 total. That engine produces, as we already mentioned, you can get those details. The Defender 110S swaps the base model's 18-inch Steelies for 19-inch 6-spoke alloys in gloss silver, upgrades from an analog instrument cluster to the interactive driver display, from fabric to leather seating with woven seat inserts, from 8 to 12-way powered front seats, and adds auto high beam assist. The S adds $3,260 to the base price, retailing for $54,375. There's no entry level nor S trim for Defenders in the P400. That slots the 3-liter V6 with 395 horsepower into the engine bay. The price ladder starts with the SE at $63,275, moving up to the HSE at $69,375, topping out at the top shelf Defender X trim at $81,925. For the first year of production, a Defender First Edition will slot in just above the HSE at $69,675. The P400 powertrain takes 5.8 seconds to hit 60 on all but the X trim, which needs an additional 3.3 seconds at 6.1 seconds, and it tops out at 129 miles per hour. And here's about the different packs that they have available. The $637 Country Pack was designed to stand out in the suburbs with head-turning style, confidence, and composure, according to Land Rover. The $1,893 Country Pack has pretensions at times spent on loose surfaces, with front and rear mud flaps, extra wheel arch protection, and the bright rear scuff plate outside, with the cargo area adds a full-height partition. The $2,844 Adventure Pack has eyes on the Overlander, with a portable rinse system, air compressor integrated into the cargo area, a 6.3-gallon seat backpack that's like a narrow carry-on bag you can also strap on, with an exterior side-mounted saddlebags. The $4,286 Explorer Pack tilts at Adventure with a touch of style. A 57-pound Expedition roof rack sits high. The exterior saddlebag, snorkel, and spare wheel cover take the middle ground. Wheel arch protection, front and rear mud flaps protect the low ground. The Defender's roof is rated for a static load of 661 pounds, but that 57-pound rack is only rated for 291 pounds. I don't think they have that.
That was well thought out.
Yeah, I don't think they have that information right.
I think that's not a static rating.
Right. It's the static rating is, I think, 600 pounds. I think the in motion rating is the close to 300 pounds. So what that means is you can put a rooftop tent on there, and then you can also sleep in it. But you can't be sleeping in it while the vehicle is moving.
Yeah, unless your sleeping bag is equipped with seatbelts.
Finally, and just for looks, the package adorns the hood with a matte black decal reading either 90 or 110. Installing the front bench to make a 6-seater costs $900. Putting in a third row to bump seating from 5 to 7 costs $1,200. Enhanced dynamic chops can be purchased with the $1,100 active electronic differential with brake-based torque vectoring. To make use of the 8,201-pound tow rating, which they spelled tow, T-O, Best to add the $650 tow hitch and the $400 advanced tow assist on trims where the ladder is available. And since there will be a few water hazards between here and there, check the snorkel for $834, which doesn't include installation. Interesting how they added the you can buy the snorkel for $800, but they're not going to install it for that price. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, that's a little odd.
It reminds me a lot of the snorkel kits you buy for your series truck that don't include any of the hose to hook it up.
Right.
In this story, how Land Rover reinvented the Defender for the 21st century. And this was, I think, a kind of a discussion with Jerry, but there's some good, McGovern, there's some good info here. Land Rover revealed its new Defender. Frank Corrado show you know that. This is not a minor accomplishment. Not only has the brand been working on a Defender replacement for most of the decade, at least since the off-Milan DC-100 concept of 2011, which I read that because I want to remind myself it's been almost 10 years. I can't believe it's been since 2011. That's when the DC-100 came out. Talking to McGovern, quote, I was at Land Rover before and left in 1999. And at that point, we were looking at Defender's replacement. So this has been a long time coming. So a little note there. I don't remember. Do you guys remember McGovern ever before saying he was at Land Rover, left and came back? Not that I know his whole history.
I don't remember that.
He goes on to say, but the truth is we're running a business, and for our strategy, which includes 3 lines of vehicles, Range Rovers, Discoveries, and Defenders, we decided to first place the emphasis on reestablishing our high-standing and higher-volume vehicle families. We needed to get the rest of the business sorted first, but this strategy and the introduction of this durable, capable, purpose-built vehicle in Defender gives us a further breadth of appeal, unquote. The Defender is an automotive icon. Did he say this? No, he did not. So the Autoblog goes on to say, the Defender is an automotive icon, essentially unchanged for decades and carrying with some of the essential strands of the brand's DNA, which makes revamping the design tough. If you mess it up, you'll never be forgiven by legions of diehard fans, and you will be granted eternal automotive ignominy. Did I say that right? Like the person who proposed making the Mustang front-wheel drive, or the one who took the round taillights off of the Corvette. Why do you think the Mercedes G-Wagon and the Porsche 911 still look slightly inflated carbon copies of their original selves? Land Rover, though, took a slightly different path. The headline of this article explains everything. Manuals are daft, says Land Rover Defender engineering boss. And the subtitle to this is even better. 3-pedal traditionalists should cover their ears now. The man responsible for leading the engineering team for the new Land Rover Defender has described the idea of fitting a manual transmission to the car as daft. Nick Rogers is the executive director of production engineering, and he isn't exactly a fan of having a 3-pedal transmission fitted to the reborn legend. Quote, a manual gearbox for me is just daft. Why is it daft? Because you are introducing NCAP systems. What's that, Harold? NCAP? Any idea?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know that acronym.
Okay, neither do I. And we've got so I'll start that again. Why is it daft? Because you are introducing NCAP or NCAP systems, and we've got a state-of-the-art motion control system on the car, linked with an MHEV system that can scoop up energy every time you decelerate. We have got millions of lines of code in the algorithms for the gearbox, motion control, e-turbo, and all the rest of it. To give someone a gear stick and then make them hang on to the gears isn't really the most efficient thing to do. Unquote.
Well, and I think that really hurts durability too, for that very reason. I don't think that the average person can keep up with driving it in a way that won't break all those fancy systems.
You mean a manual?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
If you put a manual on top of all that automated stuff, either you've got to turn all that stuff off all the time, or you've got to teach the driver how to drive very carefully so he doesn't overdrive or break those systems.
Or you have to make those systems even smarter to be able to handle poor drivers.
Right, which just adds a lot of complexity, which hurts the reliability. It actually is just a lot easier just to make it automatic and just take the stupid part out of the equation, and that's the driver.
Yeah, when you're going through all the effort of making everything as automatic as possible, you might as well make that part automatic too.
Right.
That's why you have that center seat, and it eliminates the hub in the middle of the car. And
it doesn't really. I mean, you still have a transmission, you still have a transfer case, and it has to go somewhere. So,
but you don't have this. You don't have the mechanicals and the stick coming up through the floorboard, though, and having that, and then you have that space taken up by the shifter.
Well, yeah, it's easier to reroute an automatic shifter, yes, but I mean, there were column shifters for decades in this country, so you can relocate a manual shifter just as easily.
We'll get into more of that soon. New Land Rover Defender versus old Land Rover Defender. Is it actually better? This was also a Car Buzz story. You can read the whole thing yourself if you want to go through each of the different areas. I'm going to call out just a couple of them. First, price. The new Defender will start at basically $51,000 for the longer 110 version, while in the last year of production, the original 110 cost around $47,500 for the rest of the world. Allowing for inflation, the price in 2016 would be $50,453. That is shockingly close. If the two were available in the market together now, the new Defender would win hands down to the significant bump in comfort and technology. Compare them in their own time periods, and Land Rover has them in pretty much the same spot. So that's price.
Well, you get more for your money, definitely.
Yeah. Performance, the original Defender initially inherited the 2.25 to 2.25 liter petrol and diesel engines and the 3.5 liter V8 as the Series 3 vehicles. After upgrades through its life cycle, power topped out at 134 horsepower, but more importantly for off-roading, 233 pound-feet of torque. Was it really 134 horsepower, Harold? Do you know that? That seems for the Puma, like, because it was what?
Well,
even
for the
Puma.
4 cylinders, yeah, but I think
okay.
the V8s, like the North American V8, was more than that.
Right, I would think so.
Not a ton more, but it was more than that.
The new 110 is launching with a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. We know that, badged as the P300, making 296 horsepower at 295 pound-feet of torque. So to remind you, the original Defenders had 134 horsepower, 233 pound-feet of torque, and the new 110 with the base 2-liter 4-cylinder is 296 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque.
And it weighs less.
The new one?
I think it does, doesn't it?
Let's go. Oh, let's consult our handy specs. Thanks to Alloy and Grit, curb weight is 4,800 to 5,100 pounds.
All right, so it's similar weight-wise.
What's the?
I don't remember off the top of my head
That's
the numbers, but I think it's in that same ballpark.
So it's performance, body, and chassis. The approach angle on the new Defender is 38 degrees, while not quite as good as the original. However, ground clearance has risen from 9.8 to 11.4 inches. The angle the new Defender can tilt on its side before falling over is now 45 degrees rather than 35 degrees. Weighting depth has also increased from 19.6 inches to a little over 35 inches. Hardcore off-roaders will also appreciate that the breakover angle is just about the same as between the Defenders, old and new, so the same chance of getting beached exists. The chassis on the new Defender is also much more rigid and will make a lot of difference in the great outdoors and on the open road. So there's cargo and interior and some other things if you want to go out and read all those, but those are the three that I thought was good to make a comparison between the old and the new. Yeah,
overall it's a very good comparison.
And then Land Rover dropped plans for Defender pickup truck, explains why. So is the upcoming 130 a good enough alternative? There might be bad news for pickup truck fans because Land Rover reportedly is dropping plans to build a 4-door pickup like the old one above. You can see the picture here from Motor One, using the upcoming Defender 130 as a starting point. An unnamed high-level insider from JLR said the automaker canceled the variant from future production plan while speaking with Motoring in Australia. Why would you buy a dual-cab ute when you can see what you can put in the back of one of these? This is already a ute with a roof, unquote, said the source.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Please don't use that in your marketing.
Not a good argument.
No, it's not, because there are times when you need a truck with an open bed. You just do. But the problem is it's very difficult to produce a unibody pickup truck that doesn't suck.
It's because of the monocoque.
The structural
things,
structural issues, and you go, and the roof is so integral to that. And you saw the roof off, and things get very flexible in a hurry, and so you have to find ways to stiffen that back up. And either you end up adding stupid-looking bodywork like Honda did in their pickup, or you add a lot of extra metal, and then things get heavy.
There's a reason why body-on-frame pickup trucks tend to twist horribly.
They're designed to.
Yeah, exactly.
For a reason. It keeps them from cracking.
The cheapest Land Rover Defender might make it to America. This is Gear Patrol, and they sat down with the company to find out what they were thinking. This is Nick Rogers, Executive Director of Product Engineering, as well as North America CEO Joe Eberhardt. Let's see here. The question was, how do you modernize Defender yet still make it feel like the original? And one of the answers here, I said at the outset that it shouldn't be a body-on-frame vehicle, because as soon as you've got them separated, no matter how hard you try, you join the body to the chassis, you always get movement between the two. And the rubberized mounts are always a spring. With the technology that we use with our aluminum structures, a field in which we are the leaders, we were so much better off making an incredibly stiff and strong monocoque. Question, does the new interface technology make it feel much less like an authentic Defender? And this is Nick Rogers. So much of the cars are all about authenticity and simply the idea that if you don't need it, you don't have it. We push that structurally and in the interior design, but also in the infotainment system. With the Defender, we wanted to really understand what the vision was for the original, and we made sure we went back to that original vision. Our team ran workshops to find things that were on the original that didn't have a function, and this was hard to do. Now, of course, it's also got to be modern and not just functional. So I'm going to read that one sentence again. Our team ran workshops to find things that were on the original that didn't have a function, and that was hard to do. So,
Okay, didn't have a function, not things that just didn't function.
Right.
There is a difference.
well, I hope they did that too, Harold. But yeah, things that did not have a function. Correct. And they said it was difficult to find something that didn't have a function.
Surprise, they only added things that needed a function.
Right. Next question. How is the current Defender a reflection of today's challenges and opportunities? Nick Rogers. With the original Land Rover, they created something that was very, very disruptive. It was very different and fitting of the time. Today's version of that is we have, among other things, a 48-volt hybrid system that responds and moves in literally the blink of an eye. The system is constantly evaluating how to scoop up as much energy as possible and maximize that usage. It's a modern hybrid system that also powers an electric supercharger, with the whole thing generating instant response. Next question. One of our favorite versions of the new Defender is the No Frills Commercial Edition due later this year. Do you think that there's a market for it? And Nick Rogers. Yes, I'm convinced that people are going to want to have one of these cars as the car that they use every day, even though they'll be using it as part of their business. Question was, will that version come to the U.S.? And Eberhardt says, we will be considering the groups who'd be interested in this even without a business to use it in. Discussing the topic recently triggered a thought. Maybe we don't call it the commercial version. Maybe it's just another version of the Defender. If this seems like a good idea, let me know and we'll work on it.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Well, you should send a message to Eberhardt.
It was my favorite of the unveiling too.
I'll send a message to Eberhardt then. Sounds like he wants to hear from you if you like the commercial version.
And I hope they make a Wilkes Brothers package that includes the styling that they had in that released edition.
So cool.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
It was.
Yeah, Wilkes Brothers, 4x4 specialists since 1948 in a very classic blue with the white steelies. That was so nice.
Yeah, it was perfect.
It was nice that they had that brought on stage with all the other ones. But we'll get there. Almost. We're getting closer. Remote control off-roading. You know, it's another Gear Patrol article. It's not their fault, but this enrages me. I will admit this. Remote control off-roading ? The new Land Rover Defender could offer it soon. This will permit the car to receive over-the-air software updates and enable many other high-tech features. And believe it or not, one of those features eventually could be operating the vehicle via remote control. At the product reveal for the Defender, Chief Product Engineer Stuart Firth told News.com in Australia that remote control technology was, quote-unquote, a good idea. He described
so this is so you can control your own vehicle, not someone else's, right?
He described the Defender as, quote, capable to do that in terms of its architecture, unquote. Remote control technology would be, and this is Gear Patrol, remote control technology would be an excellent add-on for off-roading and overlanding. It would allow the driver to serve as his or her own spotter when clearing particularly tricky obstacles. The technology could potentially incorporate Land Rover's activity key wearable to ensure the driver is within eyesight of the vehicle. It wouldn't be the easiest thing to pull off, though. As per Firth, the chief hurdle to implementing remote control technology for a production Land Rover will be getting legislative approval for it. Having the driver operate the vehicle remotely raises more regulatory issues than the self-parking technology currently available on some cars.
Not if it's off-road only and you find a way to limit that.
I guess if you were to put it, there'd be like an off-road mode, and then you could activate that. But
Right. I mean, the ability to self-spot around particular obstacles, I can see the case for that, and I think that starts to make sense. But otherwise, it seems a little silly.
and what's the point? Isn't part of this is
And
that
it's a security nightmare if somebody can hack in and start driving your car for you.
exactly
horrible.
Absolutely.
The only other case I can see is for those rickety log bridges. Driving
You can step back and watch your $70,000 truck plummet itself into the creek without you.
Yeah, that's.
I'm sure insurance would cover that, right?
Oh, of course it would. Oh yeah.
Yeah, the interesting thing would be how you write that up on the insurance report. Who was driving it? Nobody.
Position of driver.
Outside.
Standing.
Well, going back to the base point of this about remote driving, like, isn't the point of off-roading, at least as I see it, to challenge the driver yourself, to make sure that you can use the tool, the vehicle to do something interesting and go somewhere interesting? It seems that doing the remote driving part, what's the point? Then why go do
You
it?
may as well just stay at home in your parents' basement and play Grand Theft Auto at that point.
Or stay in your own basement and play Grand Theft Auto. Anyways,
Stay home and play video games if that's the way you want to drive.
And they've already added technology such as the see-through bonnet.
Good point.
Means you don't have to get out of the vehicle to be your own spotter.
That actually would be a better capability than getting out of the vehicle and driving it from there.
And the Defender includes that.
Just depends on how sketchy a situation you're into, but yeah, it's
true.
Most of the time, if you're in something that sketchy that you'd want that, you really shouldn't be there anyway.
Yeah, you shouldn't be outside of the vehicle either.
And you probably shouldn't be taking a brand new $70,000 vehicle out into situations like that either.
I will say I'm certainly glad that they're testing and trying those technologies, because those are things that could be good to do. If you send a vehicle to Mars or another planet, that's good stuff. But I think for the average consumer and purchaser of vehicle, I don't think that's the...
Unless Land Rover wants to pursue a big corporate fleet deal with Amazon or something.
Can't afford the new Land Rover Defender? Here are 6 cheaper alternatives. And this is Car Buzz yet again. And we'll touch on some of them. I'm not going to read out all of it. The interesting one, the first, and these are all used cars, by the way. The first one is the 2013 to 2017 Land Rover Range Rover.
So in other words, there's no new vehicle that's a cheaper alternative than the Defender?
I don't actually think... the Wrangler, the Jeep Wrangler is, but only at the lower specs.
Okay.
So yeah, they had the Range Rover, the 2012, 2013 G-Wagon, because you can get those now, I think they originally, when they came out, they were $125,000, but apparently you can get them a little cheaper now. After all, the Range Rover is still a flagship. You can score a used current generation for under 50 grand with less than 30,000 miles on the odometer. So that was why the Range Rover was on there. The G-Wagon, mentioned that. The Wrangler, it starts at $28,000, and you can get the top of the line Moab trim level, and that's $51,000, which is, of course, where the Defender starts. The Toyota 4Runner, the 2019 4Runner starts at $35,000 for the base model. The off-road oriented TRD Pro is at $46,800.
So that sneaks under the wire too.
It does. Another used one is the FJ Cruiser, which they made from 07 to 14.
For those who liked the DC 100.
Well, apparently it's that model, they have maintained their price and they're prized. As they say here, that some has become somewhat collectible, with pristine examples commanding nearly 50 grand. Although you can still find a high mileage example under 10,000 and mid mileage examples for under 20. And then the Lexus LX 570 from 08 to 15, and you can find one of those less for under 20 grand. Apparently it's supposed to be reliable. So there you go. There's some alternatives. Just some.
Well, why did they not mention just getting a used Disco?
Don't know.
Seems to me that's closer to a Defender alternative than a Range Rover.
Good. That's an excellent question, Harold. Good one.
And of course, for those for our listeners at least, the other option is to import your own old Defender and fix it up. Mm-hmm. That's an alternative.
It's a pretty good alternative too.
I like it.
Under 50.
Well, it depends
Well,
on.
yeah, it depends.
It depends on how nice you want it. Depends on how nice you want
That's
it.
true. That's true. Yeah, it depends on how nice, who's doing the work, and how long, and
But
yeah.
on the other hand, if you do put 50 grand or 60 grand into fixing it up, you're going to have a truck that's worth more than that, as opposed to buying the new Defender at 50,000, and as soon as you get it home from the dealer, it's worth less than that.
That's a very good point.
Specifically, Autoblog did a comparison between the 2020 Jeep Wrangler and the 2020 Land Rover Defender. And of course, this is a paper comparison. It's not, they didn't get to test drive them, but you can take a look at the article yourself and you can look at the stats. They've got everything, drivetrain torque and height and shoulder width and ground clearance and drivetrain, all that stuff listed up. I'm going to pull out some highlights here, maybe more than I thought, but to talk about.
That's what I call an armchair test drive.
The Land Rover is the clear, this is engines and drivetrains. The Land Rover is the clear high performance option for these two SUVs. Its base turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder is more powerful than either of the gas engines offered in the Wrangler. The Wrangler's 4-cylinder matches it on torque at least. Transmissions. The Wrangler is your only choice if you want to have a manual. The Jeep is very traditional with a standard selectable 4-wheel drive system with a 2-wheel drive and low and high range 4-wheel drive modes. On the Sahara, that's a Jeep model, there's an available full-time 4-wheel drive mode, but the other modes are still available. On the Land Rover, you get full-time 4-wheel drive, the same kind used on the Range Rover. Suspension and off-road capability. The Wrangler relies on very traditional solid front and rear axles for its suspension setup. This allows for a lot of axle articulation that helps make sure all 4 tires are on the ground and moving the SUV forward. To help with this, the Rubicon version offers disconnecting sway bars for further axle articulation, as well as front and rear electric differential lockers to keep the power going to all 4 wheels. The Defender uses a much more modern setup with independent suspension at both ends. This can provide a more refined on-road driving experience, but can limit axle articulation and lead to having a wheel or two in the air at times when off-roading. Land Rover does include various terrain settings for the drivetrain to improve traction in different driving conditions. It will also offer a locking center differential and automatic locking rear differential to help improve traction. Though the Defender sits the lowest in standard settings, its adjustable suspension can lift it to have 11.5 inches of ground clearance, which is even more than the Wrangler's Rubicon's 10.8 inches. As far as approach angles, both versions of the Wrangler will let you get started up a steeper hill, but when it comes to cresting and coming down, the Defender in both the 90 and 110 styles can handle sharper and steeper objects than comparable Wranglers. Exterior and interior dimensions. Comparing the 2-door and 4-door models, both types of Wranglers are a bit shorter, narrow, and lower than comparable Defenders on the outside. Despite that, the Wrangler does have more head and leg room for the front passengers and more headroom than the Defender. The Defender has an edge when it comes to front shoulder room and rear leg room. The Defender 110 has an extra bonus in the availability of a 3rd row of seats, something not available on the Wrangler Unlimited. When it comes to cargo space, the Wrangler has absolute maximum amount of space available, and when comparing the 2-door models, the Wrangler has more space behind the rear seats. But with 4-door models, the 110 has more cargo space behind the 2nd row, something that's possible by having enough room to cram in a 3rd row if desired. The Defender is also the clear choice if you want to tow, as it has a maximum tow rating of 8,200 pounds for both the 90 and 110. The 4-door Wrangler Rubicon is only rated up to 3,500 pounds, and the 2-door model isn't rated at all. If you want a Wrangler to tow things, you're better off with the Gladiator pickup, which can tow up to 7,650 pounds. Price, the Jeep Wrangler is unsurprisingly the more affordable choice. Though price hasn't been announced for the 2020 model, it should start at about 30 grand American for a base 2-door Sport and about $33,000 for a base Wrangler Unlimited Sport. The Land Rover Defender starts at $51,000 for the 110, and pricing hasn't been announced for the 90. So there's your on-paper comparison between the two.
Well, there's no surprises. The Wrangler's cheaper and the Defender is more technologically advanced.
The only surprise is that in any review that a Defender got more shoulder room than any vehicle.
Yeah, and that's I think that was a focus in the redesign.
For sure.
In a Defender, the only way to get shoulder and elbow room is to open the windows.
Or the door, Harold. You can open the door.
Or, yeah, well, of course, in the In the series trucks, you just took the door off.
Can you still do that with a Jeep? Can you take the doors off still?
Yes, you can, for sure.
Well, with enough patience and the right tools, you can take the doors off anything.
Fair point.
Whether
You
you
can
can
buy
put them back
half
on
doors.
again at the end of the day is another story. But yeah, the Jeeps are still very modular in that respect.
And we're getting towards the end of Land Rover Defender news here. This one, though, is about an ad, and Land Rover Defender ad called Sexist by British TV presenter. And Land Rover had their very first ad, I think was linked in with the debut. So the video in question opens with a man named Kenton Kool scaling the side of a cliff in Kazakhstan. Mr. Kool, yes, that's his real name, is something of an adventurer, having scaled Mount Everest no less than 14 times. At the top of this particular mountain, he gets a message asking where he is and a warning not to be late. As you can probably surmise, he returns to his nearby Land Rover Defender, the new one, plots a over 4,000-mile route home, and the rest of the commercial is Mr. Kool blasting through pretty much every terrain imaginable. And there's a clip, you can watch the ad if you want, it's on their website. And
that's the one they played in the unveiling, right?
Yes, thank you. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah, it tied in with the unveiling. BBC presenter or someone else said that it was just all males and it should appeal to other.
Well, it was only one person in the ad, so I mean, it's either going to be male or female. Take your pick. You're going to offend one of the genders.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of women who have done very cool things in Land Rovers. You can look back to Barbara Toy, plenty of others since then, and plenty going forward. But yeah, it comes down to which was picked for the first ad. If they're left out of all ads, then that's obviously a problem.
Right.
And the final bit of new Defender news, Land Rover Defender looks awesome in Lego. This is cool. At the same time they announced the new Defender, Lego announced a companion new Defender. One of the more complex sets we've seen, the Lego Technic version of the new Land Rover Defender 90, is made up of 2,537 individual pieces, some of which are actually functional, and not just the rotating wheels either. It has a fully independent articulating suspension, a working winch, no less than 3 little differentials, and the most sophisticated gearbox ever included in a Lego set. Measuring 16 inches long, 7 inches wide, 8 inches tall, the Lego Technic Defender will be available starting October 1, and you can pre-order yours today for $199.99 American.
So the price is listed in American dollars. So I guess we'll be able to get it here.
If you're 25 and older.
And I guess if you try to buy one when you're under 25, the government's going to come and take it from you.
Probably.
Harold, it would have to meet current Lego emission and safety regulations.
What's the wading depth?
Ooh, excellent. Good question. I don't see a snorkel either. I think that's, I'm concerned. There's no snorkel. Maybe that's an option.
How much oil does it leak from its gearbox?
Little bits of plastic drip out. All right, a few more stories that have nothing to do with the new Defender. First off, Bollinger's electric off-roaders finally revealed everything you need to know. Also, Gear Patrol, they had a lot of good info this month for us to use. So Bollinger Motors first unveiled its B1 prototype in 2017, a little over 2 years, and one relocation to the Detroit area later. The company has finally revealed the production vehicle version of its all-electric B1 and B2. Here's what you need to know. And I'm not going to read them all, but some of them. B1 and B2 will be performance beasts. Their dual motor system puts out 614 horsepower and 668 pound-feet of instant-on torque. They add the instant-on. The trucks will accelerate from 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. They will have...
Nice.
Not bad for a big ass brick.
Sorry, I tripped up there, but that's 4.5 seconds. Okay. They will have
This is why I told you I want one.
They will have nearly even 45 to 55 weight distribution, better approach, 52 degrees, breakover, 30 degrees, and departure, 43 degrees than a Jeep Wrangler. Bollinger is not aiming for the family SUV truck market. There are no airbags. Class 3 trucks such as these don't require them. The trucks do not have a fifth seat, much less a third row. Think of the B1 and
life is better in a big truck.
Think of the B1 and B2 as electric options for the buyer who would blow 6 figures on a restored and modified Bronco. What's a
or Defender?
Or Defender? Yeah, good point. What's a Class 3 truck, Harold? Do you know?
It has to do with the gross vehicle weight rating. I think Class 3 is 8,500 pounds and up, or 8,900 pounds, or something like that.
So that's pretty impressive performance from a vehicle of that weight.
Well, that's gross weight. That's not empty weight.
Okay, good point. Yeah.
But still.
But so I suspect when you get it fully laden, it's not going to make 60 and 4.5. But, you get it fully laden. I don't think you really want to be finding that stuff out because you still got to stop it.
Good point.
But it's certainly got the torque to pull fully laden.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The B1 and B...
And the cool thing is the B2 has got that multiple tailgate thing. It's got the tailgate in the back. It's got a, for lack of a better word, tailgate in the front. You can carry telephone poles in the thing.
Yeah, it's got that pass through all the way from one end to the other.
Well, you can put 14-foot lumber inside.
Yeah.
But you can drop those tailgates and you can carry 20-foot sticks.
The B1 and B2 will have a massive payload capacity of 5,200 pounds, which is more than a Ford F-250 Super Duty. A towing capacity of 7,500 pounds would place the truck towards the high end of the mid-size truck segment.
My kind of truck. That's about what I like to run.
Which actually is less than the new Defender, though. The new Defender does 8,200 pounds of towing. The truck will offer...
Well, the question is whether that's a conservative or a liberal estimate and how far you can overdo it, because I've never met a truck yet where I couldn't abuse that rating.
Right, exactly.
The B1 and B2 will use a 120 kilowatt battery system delivering an estimated 200 miles of EPA range. And Harold,
I'm assuming you meant 120 kilowatt hours.
Oh, what did I say?
Kilowatts.
Okay, yeah, I meant, there is kWh, so I apologize. Okay. Yeah, kilowatt hours.
All right.
And no price yet, Harold. Is that what you're saying? Because I didn't see that here either.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know exactly when it'll be available. We don't know how much it's going to cost. And yeah, I suspect I won't be able to afford it, but I would really like to have a B2.
Are we thinking 80 grand, 90, 100,000?
The fact that they mentioned dropping six figures on a restored Bronco in the article, that should be a clue.
Gotcha. Good point.
And the earlier story about how expensive electric vehicles are because of the battery technology. There won't be a lot of money spent on interior frills, which is another reason why I like it.
And next up is a story about dealerships in the U.S. And because I think the preconceived notions about dealerships is different than what actually is going on. This was out of Forbes, and I thought it was a good read. So we'll read a good part of this, especially if you're buying looking at buying a new car or maybe a used car. So the title of this article, Selling New Cars Proves Unprofitable for Most Auto Dealers. And I do encourage you to go out and read this article yourself, because I'm not going to read it all, but bring out what I think are highlights. For the first time since the Great Recession, the average U.S. car dealer operated at a financial loss in 2018. After adding income from all dealership departments, new cars, used cars, service and parts, the typical dealer lost $13,000 last year compared to a $430,000 profit in 2013. To survive, dealers are now dependent on conditional income or strings-attached financial incentives from automakers. This shift in dealership profitability is reshaping an industry that is over a century old. Retailing new vehicles is unprofitable for most dealers, with the average car sold for a $735 loss as of the latest data. Consumer adoption of online shopping sites forced dealers to lower retail margins as buyers pursued the lowest prices. New car pricing is another cause, with the average sale price reaching $36,000 in 2018, up from $31,000 in 2012. The switch in consumer preferences to SUVs, plus added electronic gadgets, with the later partially mandated by government regulations, increased vehicle prices to levels out of reach of most car buyers. As prices rose, dealers lowered margins to make monthly payments affordable. You might want to read the whole thing yourself. This is a specific example about a BMW dealer. The author says, according to one BMW dealer I interviewed who asked not to be identified, the average 2018 gross profit for each new BMW vehicle sold in his New York City area dealership was negative $1,500, down from a $1,200 profit in 2016. He explained that BMW provides him with a 5% incentive based on the cost of each vehicle he sells. While he admits his dealership is still profitable as a result of BMW's incentive income program, he claims the automaker controls his dealership's operations by controlling his profitability. Quote, I'm no longer an independent retailer store, but instead a delivery center for BMW. Nearly every aspect of my business, sales, service, or parts, is tied to an incentive, unquote. State franchise laws prohibit automakers from selling directly to consumers. Tesla is a limited exception as it does not have franchise dealers. Thus, to continue selling their vehicles in the U.S., automakers have a vested interest in the profitability of their dealer network. The industry continues to blur the lines between dealers as independent sellers and as automaker-controlled distribution points. There will be long-term ramifications, like less store autonomy and even fewer dealerships. Dealers who can't meet brand standards are exiting the business, either selling their dealerships or, in extreme cases, closing them. According to Mercer Consulting, a 25% decrease in U.S. dealership ownership is expected by 2025, with difficulty meeting automaker brand standards driving the trend. To counter incentive dependence and improve margins, dealers increasingly emphasized used car sales as well as making their service and parts department competitive with independent repair shops. They've also focused on finance and insurance packages, which bring customers back to the dealership for maintenance and service. Since 2011, the industry has seen double-digit revenue and profit gains in all of these areas, with service and parts sales growing nearly 50%. And while these tactics have increased dealer margins, they have not yet supplanted the income losses from new vehicle retailing. Moreover, automaker programs have expanded into these areas as well, with incentives tied to pre-owned sales, service, parts, and F&I penetration.
Sounds like a rough game at this point.
And it goes back to the article I read about my local dealership with, I'm sure there was a lot of Land Rover required things that they had to do.
Well, like the off-road demonstration area, for instance.
Exactly. Right.
Which is not a requirement for all brands, but it is for Land Rover.
I think I saw in this article, I didn't highlight it, but there was something about one dealership, one manufacturer required the dealership to purchase a specific tile from a specific country. Like,
yeah, that
was like, what? Not just you had to have, like the red tile, that was this size by this size. No, you had to have this tile from this country, from this region.
From this supplier, which, by the way, just happens to be a wholly owned subsidiary of the,
Follow up to the Dalai Lama's Land Rover. It has sold. It was for $143,000 at a Sotheby's auction. The 14th Dalai Lama's former Land Rover, was a 2 or 2A? I guess it was a 2, sold $443,000. The buyer's identity has not been revealed. The truck was fully restored in 2006 and still maintains many of its original parts, including the seats, tires, license plate, interior parts. According to the auction house, it was later featured on the cover of Land Rover Lifestyle magazine in December 2007, when it was named one of the 6 best Land Rovers in the U.S. And the Dalai Lama had it, looks like, from February of '66 for about 10 years, I think. So that's been sold.
I wonder what sort of important things it allowed him to do.
Well, it didn't sound like he did much with it while he was in exile.
I wonder if you were to buy the Dalai Lama's Land Rover, if it would give you any additional enlightenment off-road somehow.
The only thing is he didn't drive it. He had a driver.
Which was his brother.
Right, but his brother's not the Dalai Lama.
No.
Now he's the Dalai Lama's driver.
Exactly.
Which would be a cool job, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Finally in the news, a passing. Jessie Combs, who's a race driver, TV host. She
all around badass she was.
Absolutely. She died in a land speed record attempt. This was at the end of August. So,
yeah, as I understand it, they're going. Guinness is going to certify the runs from that attempt, and she will be officially the fastest woman on Earth.
Oh, good.
Nice.
I hadn't heard that. Yeah, Jessie was a host of
531, I believe, was the number to beat.
Jessie was the host of Overhaulin', Extreme 4x4, All Girls Garage, and a part-time host of Mythbusters. I remember her from seeing her in Mythbusters, and she appeared on Jay Leno's Garage. Jessie cultivated a passion for speed and automobiles. Soon after her birth in Rapid City, South Dakota, her career took her to Laramie, Wyoming, to attend Wyotech, where she received a degree in custom automotive fabrication. She raced the King of the Hammers event in 2010, 12, 13, and earned a spec class win in 2014. And the distinction of becoming the first woman ever to place at any Ultra 4 event. In 2011, Jessie raced the Baja 1000, finishing second in the Class 10 division. She said in her official biography, "I will try everything at least twice. I wouldn't want to be jaded by the first attempt." Thoughts out to Jessie and her family.
Well, yeah, and going back to our earlier story about the ads where they had the lone climber, they could have had a lone woman speed champion driving one of these things, but sadly that opportunity is lost.
No. She was aiming for a 619 mile per hour record in a jet-powered vehicle when she...
Well, yeah, she was part of the North American Eagle team, but as a tangent to that, she was also chasing the fastest woman record, which I think was 513, 518, something like that was the number, and she had previously set a 400 mile an hour record, and so she was going after this number.
483.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Right before she died, she did a 531 average, which apparently they're going to certify.
Jesse was 39 years old. And that's the news for this month. In a moment, our new Defender discussion. And now the moment you've been waiting for, hearing our personal thoughts on the new Defender. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to go each in turn. I'm going to go first, and then Harold and Morgan, and then we'll have a general discussion about those. I'll start off. My first thought when I saw the new Defender for the first time was they did it. They brought Defender into today, and the more I saw it, the more I heard about it, the more I liked it. So these are the elements that appealed to me or caught my attention, the ones I liked. So basically the likes. The proportions, I thought the clean flat lines, the fender bulge at the hip was reminiscent of a Series 2, the upright windshield, and that, what I'm calling the evolved bonnet. I like that. The metal dash, that magnesium beam, definitely was a reference more to me of a series truck than a Defender, and I really like that. That was a good touch. There were useful grab handles, which if a series truck, they had grab handles in those things, but we really shouldn't use them because you might pull the whole dash off or have a problem. The satin paint, I liked it. I thought it looked good. That was a nice look. The steel wheels, fantastic. They looked really good and made the vehicle look nice, and it was a good choice.
I think they're the only wheels that make sense.
Yes. The choice of having coil or air suspension, I thought was a good option to allow people to choose which one they wanted. The size, as Brian Joslin told us, that when you see it in the size, it's bigger than you think. I thought the 110 looked like a 110, just in size and its weight and proportions. They prepared and were ready for off-roading. It has the overhangs and the ride height and the wading depth and the spare on the outside. They were ready to go and prepared for off-roading. They were also gave consideration and preparation for overlanding. Different options available depending whether you're overlanding, off-roading, or you're not doing any of those. So those were the things that grabbed me, caught my attention. The things that didn't, or I didn't like or didn't appeal to me, I thought the front end seemed too busy. The headlights to me should be fully round. The fact they had that half roundness to them. And if you've been looked at Jeeps, especially in the last year or two in America, they have this angry eyes look. And I thought that the new Defender had that same look, which I don't particularly like. The rear lights, I thought they should be round too. I'm not against them, but I thought they should be round because that to me was more Defender-y. Definitely the price or the cost of the vehicle, although we've talked, if you kind of do some comparison to the Defender and you adjust for inflation and those kinds of things, the price is in there, but still it's definitely gone upscale and it's definitely more money. The center front seat, personally, don't like it. I can't think of a need that I would have to have someone sit next to you while you're driving. It made no sense to me. The fact that there's no stick shift, I understand why, and we talked about it and the superiority of having the automatic in this application, but personally, again, not something that appealed to me, that I didn't really like. That gear panel, the pannier, they call that's on the outside of the vehicle, just especially on the 110, just looks out of place and makes no sense to me. Checker plate on the bonnet and the fenders, I think the more I thought of that one, the more I don't like it. It should be a little more purpose-built instead of just there as like a decoration. And then finally, things I didn't like, the rear door was not set up for right-hand drive vehicles or right-hand drive countries in the world. If they were making this for the American market, in particular, bringing it back here, you think they would have provided and prepared for that. They did a lot of other consideration, a lot of other preparation for things, and removed a lot of the charms, as our guest later will talk about. To me, that's one that they should have fixed and could have done. A rear door being able to open for us on the right-hand side market. General comments I had about the reveal itself. I thought they needed a more dynamic presenter. Spaeth and McGovern, I didn't think were the right people to kind of start off all. They could have been included, but the entrance down that slope they had, it seemed like almost 90 degrees to me, but it was, a steep slope that they had in that studio was fantastic. I thought that was great. It was a really nice job. It was very impressive. They brought the entire range out, including, as we mentioned earlier, about the commercial one. They brought all them out on stage and showed them all off. That was great. Having, though, especially if you're trying to appeal to the American market, having the major reveal for this vehicle at 4 a.m, didn't appreciate that. That one I didn't appreciate. I did stay up. I watched it at live because I wanted to. That was appropriate for me to do so.
No one forced you.
Yes, they did, Harold. I was forced. I admit it's probably a personal rant. I want to call all the publications and websites who leaked or released the Defender images and details early. That wasn't cool. I understand.
No, it wasn't cool. It definitely wasn't cool.
I understand that they have information and they want to share it. And for me, the reveal, the Defender was akin to seeing or watching a favorite movie or television show or reading a good book. Don't ruin the experience for me. I hear some people saying, but didn't you see photos of it weeks before? Yeah, I did personally. Yes, I did. But they were not high quality photos. And I only saw a handful at that. And certainly I didn't see any video.
And they weren't in a publication, a regular publication.
Correct. So releasing information early does not gain you anything. And this was a one-time event. I didn't appreciate you spoiling a bit of it for me. End of my rant. And end of my new Defender thoughts and overview.
I guess it's my turn. I have a lot less to say, but that's fine. John, you covered a lot of what I was going to say. But bottom line is I don't hate it as much as I thought I might. I still don't think I'll own one, but it's not as stupid as it could have been. But there are 3 key points that I'll make. Number 1, 3 words, factory checker plate. Enough said.
Wait a minute. You mean you didn't like the factory checker plate? Want to be clear?
No.
Okay. Good.
I don't. No, it's just like for all the reasons we think that a lot of times trucks get over checker plated, and here the factory has gone and thrown some on right off the bat. And I don't think it's really doing anything except looking stupid. It's not really protecting anything because the way they've installed it is it's inset. So it's not really protecting the bodywork. It's just there for the look of it, which to me is the wrong reason to have checker plate. I do like the sawed-off rear end. I like the look of that with the nice sharp corners there. And I like the square tail lights. I like what they were trying to do stylistically. It kind of reminds me of the square tail lights on the North American spec Defenders. However, I don't like the second set of mini-me square tail lights. Pick one set and go with it. And I agree with John. I don't like the front end. They say that it's somehow minimalist or reductive, I think was their word, and I think that's wrong. I think it's far more complicated than it needs to be. And those god-awful headlights that look like somebody was playing Angry Birds on their phone while they were sketching the front end of the truck. Come on. I do like the Alpines. I like the fact that they included Alpine windows.
Yeah.
However, I think they put them in the wrong place. Alpines were always in a position where the rear seat passengers would enjoy the view, and now they are providing good view for the cargo. Well, that's kind of my short list of things I don't like about it. Am pleased that they did incorporate some styling cues that look more like the old Defender than I thought it was going to. So that's probably my reason why I don't think it's as stupid as it could have been.
My impression is very much like both of yours. I'm a tech geek, so I like new gadgets and new things, but I am definitely not an early adopter. It's not something that I would, let alone be able to afford, but it's not something I would jump on and get immediately. But I did feel that the marketing team did an excellent job with the slow reveal. So I was very familiar with the shape by the time it was launched. And
yet we were still salivating to see it.
It's true. Exactly. So I was very okay with the overall shape. I really like the rear end, with the exception of the taillights, and not so much because they're square, but the position. They should have been out further, closer to the edge.
Yeah, put the big ones out on the edge and throw away the little ones. I think it would be perfect then.
Exactly. Yeah, that would be perfect in my mind. Beyond that, the front end, I actually don't mind it. I don't even mind the headlights as much as I thought I would. Overall, the vehicle doesn't look that different from the DC-100, but it doesn't look so similar that I dislike it either.
I'm sorry,
So-
I have to challenge you on the DC-100. I think it does look not completely, but the front end certainly looks different than the DC-100.
Well,
The front end looks quite
it's reminiscent of the DC-100, but it kind of looks like the DC-100 and the Defender had a love child.
Right, exactly. They somehow managed to find that middle ground of those two. Like both of you, the steel rims are perfection. I don't think they should have any other options.
No alloys, none at all.
Yeah. No,
The
those are
aftermarket
perfect.
can take care of that part just
There
fine.
we go. There we go.
Yep. And I had the same feeling on the Alpine windows as Harold, that they actually look right on the 90, but on the 110 they're too far back. But regarding the rear windows, whatever those square logo pieces are that they cover the rear windows with.
Floating
Well, not-
pillar, I think they call it.
Yeah, it's the floating pillar, not even the boxes, which, the gearboxes seem like they would just get ripped off first thing. Logo piece there, it just doesn't seem right to me.
Now, the clip-on ladder that mounts to it isn't that bad, and it might be an acceptable way to hide that hideous-looking thing, but I don't know.
Agreed. And I read somewhere that they're removable, but either way, I just don't like that square.
yeah, I'd
there
be
where the
finding a
windows
way
should
to
be.
rip that thing off one way or another.
But beyond all of that, I really liked their marketing campaigns. Their videos seemed very, very Land Rover to me, very Defender-like. It really is purpose-built for off-roading, considering it's a modern vehicle. Overall, I actually like it.
We'll start doing the discussion phase. I want to start off with something that neither of you mentioned that I liked that would kind of surprise me, and that was the interior, specifically the metal dash with the magnesium thing. That didn't appeal to either of you?
No, I like it stylistically. I like the fact that they're trying to honor the open dash of the previous Defender and more to the point the Series 3s. However, it kind of, for me, I get this mental image, when they talk about it being made of magnesium, of all the behind the dash electric fires that I've been involved with in the years, and I'm just thinking a magnesium dash with an electric fire. Oh, that'll be spectacular.
Yeah, it will.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a good
Get your
point.
marshmallows.
And your dark sunglasses.
Yeah, I actually really like the interior. It's probably one of my favorite features.
It's actually pretty nice. It is.
Yeah,
They did a good job with it.
and I was not expecting it to harken back to the Series 3 and the early Defenders at all. I thought they were going to go for like some kind of Puma era Defender interior.
Right.
So
I like
very
the
impressed with that.
4-spoke steering wheel because that's a very early Defender.
Yep.
The rivets and the nuts and bolts that are in the door area that are, you can see them and you can touch them.
Yeah,
it's
but
not just covered
are they
over.
real?
They're supposed to be. No, that was everything I've heard. They are legit pieces. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not just like stuck on. No, purposeful. When I looked at some of the pictures of the front and the dash, that screen that's there, there's space behind that. And then there's even there's a glove box underneath of that tray area. Then there's the tray area, and there's I think some plugs that you can connect in your devices and put them in there. And if you get the two-seater and don't get the center seat, there's even more places to plug in your devices, which admittedly everybody has, and they're going to want to put in their vehicle. It's the well thought out, nice touches.
And to add to your point that you made earlier about the center seat and not liking that, I don't think I would have one either. I much prefer the center console, but I like the fact that they're giving people the option.
That makes it feel a little more utilitarian, that you really can cram 6 people into the D90.
Right, and that center
or if
seat
you-
does fold forward and make like a mini console. It's not as nice as the real center console, but at least it's somewhat convertible still. But I like that they've given people the option.
Yep.
Good point.
And, it could actually be handy if you were to take, say, the 110 and pull out the rear seats for overlanding and still have the option of putting 3 people in the front.
Oh, sure.
If you
Yeah.
needed to.
Let's go 26,000 miles overlanding with 3 people in the front seat.
Well,
It's less about overlanding the whole
But
distance.
on the other hand, if you have no other seats, the option of the third person for, because when you're overlanding, every now and then you have the need to shuttle a friend or whatever. So the ability to add a seating position quickly is a good thing.
All right, valid.
Right.
Okay, valid point.
And in a use case like my the meat wagon, my truck, I have the 3 across seating in it, and I'm not going to rip it out and put in a center console, even though I like having a center console, because then I can't put a third person in it.
Precisely.
Even though I'm not a fan of the center console, the fact that they can do it is certainly a good thing, and it's added by the fact that they don't have a manual transmission, so you can do that. And it was nice, it goes to your point, Harold, that they gave that option. They didn't just say we're putting in 2 seats and we're done. We are considering giving you an option. That is good.
Right.
Yeah, you can do it in your Series 3 too. It's just a little uncomfortable for the person in the middle seat.
Right. Yes.
Right.
And you're not going to put it,
like I said, in the case of mine, when I have no second row,
Right.
The option is I can put a third person up front, or they can lie down on the stretcher and back.
one of the questions I had and wanted to bring up with discussion is, why would you buy the Defender over a Discovery? They seem very similar, similar capability. I know it's not exact, but
well, if you could get the commercial version and the ability to just throw all kinds of junk in the back of it, I think it beats the Disco.
Yeah, I would say that even most of the protective mats and stuff are still better in the Defender than they are in the Disco. So if you really want to use it for something like that,
some of the things
that's going to be better. But also the off-road functionality and the towing capacity is increased with the Defender over the Discovery.
Yeah, I did hear that mentioned, that the Defender was purpose-built for overlanding and off-roading, and some specific tech things. There's more suspension travel on the Defender 2, or the new Defender. 2-speed transfer case is an option in the Discovery, whereas I think it's a standard in the Defender.
I'd have to really look at them side by side, even as an armchair thing. But it strikes me that there may be more headroom in the Defender.
Very possibly, considering the rake of the windshield.
Yeah.
And that low roof line, especially the in the back where it falls off in the Disco.
Another thing I liked, and I think we've kind of hinted to it, or if we haven't hinted to it, is Land Rover came out with all of these accessories and gear from the get-go, from jump, and you have, dog things you can put, a dog ramp, and you can put a rooftop tent. And I thought that was so well planned and well done that they had everything ready to go and prepared, and say you can do all this immediately.
Right. Well,
I thought it was a really good thing.
Decades of watching the aftermarket to learn from.
They were leaving money on the table. Yes, absolutely.
That's definitely something they've discussed wanting to do. Nice to see that they're actually doing it, and immediately.
And I'd like to see a little more. I'd like to see a little more of it available a la carte versus buying the packages.
True.
A nice hearkening and touch point to the Series days, when Series had doormobiles and you had some purpose-built things, and to me that was also a nice return to those days that they had in the past. Now you have, instead, you don't have a doormobile now, but you have rooftop tent.
Because you can't cut up the unibody to do that,
right? But you do have you do have rooftop tents and other things you can put up there, so that at least there's that connection. It
would be nice if you could do the expandable roof on the new Defender.
That would be,
because there are a lot of folks that would prefer to camp in the vehicle with extra headroom versus having to get out and climb up.
Yeah, they have those glass panels. Could you possibly remove the glass panel, build something on top, and then that would be your pass-through?
Hatch.
Yeah.
That could be. You might be able to.
There you go. Get to work on that, people.
It's potential for the aftermarket to tap in and produce something superior.
The Alpine windows, I liked them. I don't know. I guess I'm not as concerned about them as you guys were. Maybe that's something, if I see them in person, be a little more concerning. But I thought that was fine. No diesel in the U.S. was a little concerning. I think that would have been a nice touch to have diesel here.
We've gotten used to that with everybody else. So.
Yeah, and It certainly seems that diesel's probably on its way out, I think, generally speaking.
Thanks to Volkswagen, they just don't sell well here anymore.
Their thinking probably was, why introduce it in 2, 3, 4, maybe even 10 years, we take it away, or we can't do it. So why do it?
It just seems like an about face from all of their press releases saying we're still committed to diesel. I guess maybe the revised take on that is they're still committed to diesel, but only where diesel makes sense.
You'll notice later when we're talking to Thomas, I don't know if we actually said this during the conversation, but it's certainly a note I took down later was that it took 63 years for them to fix the bulkhead. Which I thought was, because the bulkhead would rust out and have all sorts of problems. And
well, they didn't really fix it; they just eliminated it.
Well, yeah. That's a fix too, Harold. Is it? If you look at risk management, there's different ways of handling risk. There's different ways of fixing things. And this way, they eliminated it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I could say that it took them 70 years to learn how to build something the way everybody else has for 80 years.
And something that we haven't really explored or talked about in the past, because this is something I just learned, and you'll hear this in the upcoming conversation with Thomas, is how Land Rover's been a leader, even a transformer of in the off-road 4-wheel drive SUV market, especially with the Range Rover. And it's not something I had been conscious of, I suppose. So we'll have that conversation a little bit later with Thomas, but I wanted to bring it up here.
Well, the Range Rover created the whole market.
What I was trying to bring in with that is how bringing out the Range Rover, the series truck, was kind of a prototype and a workhorse in the development of getting to that, to the Range Rover. And then now the Range Rover and the Discovery have been a prototype workhorse preparer developer for the new Defender. And it's interesting how that has kind of come around full circle. That
but that's not the first time it's made that lap. This is the second lap of going full circle, because the Range Rover developed the whole coil spring and all-wheel drive technology in 1970, and then they applied it to the Disco and the Defender.
Yeah, the Defender is pretty much
it's a Range Rover. It's a series
Land
truck
Rover.
on a Range. It's a series truck on Range Rover suspension and drivetrain.
And I think that's a good connection with the past. The same things that have been done in the past for Defender and for Range Rover and for Discovery have been done again now for Defender. Right. And it's a nice connection.
Full circle.
Yes, exactly. And so, they're, in this case, they've tested the chassis, they've tested out the air suspension, they've worked out a lot of these problems, the bulkhead, they've tested out and worked out some of these issues. And I think that will give Defender a leg up on being the capable and quality vehicle that we're anticipating.
Well, and the nice thing about it when they went that way the first time was that it was the application of proven technology, and it made sense. And at that point, it was sort of like, you had these 3 different families of vehicles, and the Range Rover was always the forefront, the cutting edge. And then once it was proven, it got put into the Disco, which was, they used to call it the poor man's Range Rover. It was sort of the intermediate. And then once it was fully mature, it got put onto the workhorses, the utilities, the Defenders. And now those distinctions are a bit more blurred, and now it's more about the lifestyle as opposed to like the levels.
Well, that is our podcast, Centresteer podcast, new Defender roundup review of the debut of the new Defender. So now that you've heard what we thought about the new Defender, we're curious what you think of the new Defender. Send us an email, send us a Facebook message. I don't mind Instagram, but it's, Instagram all goes to my phone, so it's tough. I'm better at typing on a proper keyboard than I am on a telephone, the smartphone keyboard. So I guess I'd prefer email. If you want a response, it's better to go email. But we're curious what you have to say. Let us know.
And of course, if you do actually get to see one in the metal, send us a selfie.
If you do get one in the metal, invite us, because we'd like to join you.
If you get to drive one, definitely invite us.
Yeah, especially if you're on this continent.
And the last bit of new Defender news was, do you guys know how long it took for the first Defender to be sold? And do you know what it was? This is according to the Land Rover Communication and PR Director, Richard Agnew. He tweeted this.
Now, are we talking proper Defender? Are we talking 90s 110s? Are we talking the series truck, because certain folks in Land Rover think that's part of the Defender lineage.
Here's what he said. X time, which I'm asking you to guess, that's how long it took after reveal moment for the first Defender to be sold online at landrover.co.uk. And of course, it was a 110 first edition with khaki interior, hashtag fast fingers. So it was a silver 110 first edition. How much time after the reveal before they sold the first Defender? It was 36 minutes. They sold their very first new Defender sold within 36 minutes of the reveal. I think that's some Land Rover history, isn't it?
Took them half an hour to sell one. That doesn't actually sound very good.
I had heard of people putting down payments on new Defenders at their local dealerships, even here in the U.S. Doesn't count. I suppose you have to go to the website and have ordered one.
Yeah, I think that was the first sale online.
Which actually you can't do in the U.S. because that's not how we're set up to sell cars. As you now, if those of you who are not from the U.S., you now know. All right, that is our new Defender roundup. Happy to hear what you think of what we think. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic cars and trucks from Europe and South America. They're a registered Virginia dealership with a physical showroom just 45 minutes west of Washington, D.C. They specialize in importing and restoring different makes, models, and variants of vehicles not originally sold in the United States. Their vehicles are imported, titled, and available for you to test drive before you buy. For the Land Rover enthusiast looking for two-door Range Rover Classics, TDI-powered Discoveries, or beautifully restored Defenders, their showroom in Marshall, Virginia is a unique destination. Looking for something special? They can help source, restore, and import that special truck you've been looking for. Contact Commonwealth Classics for your next classic vehicle. Commonwealth Classics. Visit www.cwclassics.com. And now on the Centresteer podcast, Thomas Enston, automotive journalist, and he runs Land Rover Photo Album. Welcome to the show, Thomas.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You are a photojournalist and you run the Land Rover Photo Album. We saw you're on Instagram. You were for the new Defender reveal. And more importantly, you have a 2-hour love letter to the Defender. So that's why I wanted to have you on the show. So thanks for coming on to talk about it.
2 hours and 15 minutes and 50 seconds.
Who's counting?
2 hours.
It was ambitious.
Indeed it was. Indeed it was.
I'm just thinking, how many weeks did it take to produce that much finished footage, given that it takes hours per minute, it seems like.
It was initially, the initial cut was about 4.5 hours long. That was too much. Some would argue 2 hours plus is too much. There's a lot going on.
I would say 2 hours going into it was too much, but as I get into it, I'm like, I'm enjoying this. This was fun. I did enjoy it, and the 2 hours and 15 went by pretty quickly.
Yeah, I can sit for 2 hours, but yeah, 4 hours plus, that's like Gone with the Wind on wheels.
It is. Yeah, and it's no Gone with the Wind.
No, not so much.
It took a long time to film. A lot was cut out, cold. It was all about flow. And as I got down to the time you see it as, the length, I couldn't see any more that I could pull away from it, really, without, it wouldn't be as effective in terms of, for fans, that is, and for myself, as it was the way it could only be, really. There's a few mistakes here and there, but that was a time, I was running out of time doing it, and it took a long time to edit. About 2 years to film.
It was my first question. When did it start, and where was the idea come from? And when did you begin production?
Well, I was in Dunsfold for the beginning, and it occurred to me that with the new Velar coming, I realized that obviously the new Defender's coming. And whilst I was filming a Velar little feature, a small little 15-minute vlog, I realized that with those Land Rovers there, I should start thinking of doing a Defender one, because that would be replaced soon. No one knew at the time exactly when, but it was coming. And that was it, really. I was around significant Land Rovers, and I thought, start filming now. It was, I knew that would be a knee-jerk reaction. It's the Defender's a very, very, very honored vehicle. In fact, it's a lot of what I said, especially in the first half, was sacrilege, even to me. It was painful to put it together.
I liked the fact that you, I think, were honest and open about what the Defender is and isn't. I thought that was actually quite refreshing.
Yeah, I could have done just one big pure love letter, but I think this is a pure love letter. For anybody who's actually owned a Defender, it's not just one big sweet ride. There's bittersweet moments.
Isn't that the point about a love letter? Is if you're in love, you look over the flaws?
Absolutely. That's exactly it. You love it regardless, unconditionally.
So you bring up charm are really annoyances, which I thought related to the conversation. What aspects of what are the charms or the annoyances that annoy you the most?
I don't know. I mean, if you got a child that picks his nose in public and you try your best to try and stop it, you still love your child. I don't know, how can I put that? This is there's a lot wrong with the Defender, but wrong is subjective, because if you love something much, you don't care, you overlook it. Let's just say elbow room, which I bring up as a joke a number of times in it, that wouldn't be at all, it just wouldn't be allowable in any car built today.
Oh, right.
To have no elbow room, which also means no side impact room. Hopping out of it and getting things caught on the
which I've done. Which thank you for bringing that up, because I've done that.
Everyone has. And the annoying thing is, it's not just getting yourself caught on it, getting out. It's the seatbelt hanging up on it when you go to shut the door.
There's so much.
Because the seatbelt comes around as you get out, it loops over the latch tang, and then you go to slam the door, and all you do is mangle up the seatbelt, and the door bounces open again.
That's right. And your belt loops get caught on the door latch, and also your coat pockets get caught on the seat. The lever that you can pull to adjust the seat gets caught around in your coat. It's like sitting at a church pew for hours on end when you go on a journey. There's no way you just have to keep pulling over or dying of backache. It's not a problem if you really love them at all, but for someone who's unwitting, who likes the look of Defender and just thought, I'll have a quick go of that, and they can hop into it. If they don't have that love, they just into the initial look and hop in it would scare them to death and make them go, well, I'm not bothering.
Right.
No, you got to want it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Those are minor things, though. I mean, they're very loud, they're rattly, they've never been sealed. Some era models can rot to bits before they even left the showroom. That's an exaggeration. But if you know Land Rovers are old, in certain periods, the steel was from different areas and different locations, and they had a tendency to rot more than others.
I don't know. The thing that you didn't mention was the water that drips on your driver's foot. That's my biggest annoyance.
Yeah. I mean, this is not. It's a rudimentary design based from something some time ago.
Well, that's why they have shopping bags with Land Rover logos on them. That's your logo footwear.
Put over my foot. Yeah, I do that, by the way, Thomas. I actually do put a shopping bag over my foot when I'm driving and it's raining. That's the best. I like waterproof shoes. No, that doesn't do it. Putting some sort of towel. Nope, doesn't do it. You just got to plug up the holes. Nope, that doesn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a little bit of backlash from that film that's been privately sent to me, and I won't mention names. Defenders are their business, and they see that I've caused them harm, but I don't think they have at all. I always thought that you can't tell a Defender owner that they're not to buy. Someone who wants the Defender's going to get one no matter what I say. That's
odd that they would think that you're trying to harm their business, when that doesn't make any sense to me at all. You're just giving the reality that is, and for those who may want to buy one, know what they're getting into. I mean, that's...
Yeah. I think they only watched the first part as well, really, and then made their mind up. I think if they'd watched the whole lot, then they realized that that's not how I feel at all. I was reluctant to say what I said, but people would only take me seriously if I said the truth.
Thing is, I cater to Defender owners, and nothing what you said in your videos was earth shattering. We all know this stuff, and the people I want to cater to know this stuff. So if somebody watches your video and suddenly decides they don't want a Defender, that doesn't hurt me, because that's not the kind of customer I'm after anyway.
Indeed. Yeah, that's it was always going to be tricky ground dissecting the Defender, and I only did it to a basic level. There's a lot more detail. I glossed over just minor things, really. I'm all for the vehicle in every single way, and it was very hard to confuse the two. I didn't want people to confuse that I had some sort of major issue with it. I don't. It's despite those things that I love it.
One thing I thought while watching it is how it was you were more of a non-U.S. specific or centric view. And it would be interesting if had you added a little more of a U.S.-centric view, knowing that we can't get Defenders that are newer than 25 years old, as you're probably aware of that. And it was interesting how you're talking about some of the more modern Defenders that we can't even get to. We're just able now to get to actual Defenders here in the country, and they're the original examples. Clearly, they've improved manufacturing of the Defender since the 80s, when the ones that we can now get, and that would have been an interesting aspect for you were discussing how the American market was the largest, and Land Rover needs to bring them back here, and they're going to sell, but that jump is going to be bigger in the American market than anywhere else in the world for how the Defender is produced and manufactured.
Yeah, it takes a special kind of love to be a Defender fan in this country because we can't even get the good ones yet.
Yeah, it's tricky. I guess, I mean, you guys got the Range Rover in '87, which is 17 years after we had it. You couldn't get enough of it, and I imagine Defender might be the same. It is unfortunate for you guys though that you couldn't have more of a love affair with the Defender until it was removed.
And the same point you made about how the Defender didn't sell towards the end of the run, they didn't sell here in America either when they were here for those few years of 95 through 97. They sat on the lot for years, the new ones.
Well, I think they were a bit overpriced and unappreciated because they were misunderstood.
Yeah, I also think that if you go back to say up until about the mid to late 80s, here and most other places, Land Rovers were more literally just a farm tool, and people noticed them as much as they would notice, say, a Mitsubishi L200. Mm-hmm. They're just in the background. They didn't really matter for much apart from select fans. And as Land Rover became more and more popular between, let's say, mid 80s to early 2000s, that's when people really wanted them, and it was all too late by then.
The ones that were here in the U.S., didn't sell. I think some of that was point that you make of building a car for the time, and even in the mid 90s, Defender in the U.S. was not built for the time. It was still 10 years old, probably, and even maybe older in some capacity. And I think that contributed to not selling well here. Folks thought it was going to be maybe a Range Rover or the cars of the mid 90s that they were expecting.
I agree with you there. It's I think it's the same here, I mean, people love them, they love the look of them, but they don't want to live there because they hadn't really improved. There's certain parts that had improved, but when it became the 9110, they borrowed a lot of tech from the Range Rover and made it a bit more manageable. And then the same when it became Defender. But Range Rover kept improving and Defender didn't.
Do you have any sense as to why they didn't do that as much? Maybe you've gotten to talk to JLR folks. Was it simply they put their time and money towards other models?
I think they had contracts. You don't quote me on this. I mean, this is just me guessing here. I think they had contracts and had to fulfill those, as Defender was. But I also think that Range Rover took off in a big, big way. And they realized, and Discovery did too, and they realized that that's where the market was heading. And Defender, as it stood, well, people who wanted that, who desired that, were few and far between, even if there was a big following. The big following, well, people already had the older ones. And if you look at the sales, they started to taper off from, say, 2005 onwards and just started taking a bigger and bigger nosedive in Europe, that is.
Do you think part of that is because contracts were tapering off as well?
No, I think that there's other markets, other manufacturers they'd landed in the 80s with, say, Datsun 4-Track, Mitsubishi Shogun, or Pajero, as the rest of the world call it, the Nissan Trooper. Gosh, there's a fair few, really, and Hilux, Toyota Hilux, Land Cruiser, they all were coming in a big way. I mean, their immediate response to that in the 80s was the Discovery, that sweet spot between Range Rover and Defender. Defender was becoming more and more obsolete as other manufacturers were introducing their iterations, their versions.
And speaking of the Discovery, I thought you made some excellent points about the Disco 3, maybe the Disco 4, and even the Disco 5, being that really replacement for the Defender in the current era. Any further thoughts on that, or anybody giving you any challenged you on that? And I have a follow-up question, which is why are you going to buy a new Defender versus a new Discovery? Is there a sense of what's the market for each of those? There seems to be a lot of crossover at this point.
Well, a second ago, I said that the Defender was becoming more and more obsolete. Now, what I mean by that is not obsolete to people who want and use Defenders. I mean to the general public and users in general, especially when other options were similar but cheaper or more reliable. So that's definitely to like the agricultural scene. With Discovery, that response was you got a slightly watered down Range Rover that was more practical and had better road manners. It just ticked more box for the everyday user. This was something Land Rover obviously cottoning on to. They really, I mean, hence the Freelander. And with the new Discovery, well, why have that? I have a new Defender when there's a Discovery. Well, I think then Defender is definitely built as a purebred off-roader when you look at it and get up close to it. With the overhang removed and the spare wheel put on the back door, that's a pure off-roader thing to do. The Discovery is, again, they went back to their roots on the Disco. Before the Disco 1 and 2 were more like Range Rover, and then by 3 and 4 they were still opulent, well, a lot more opulent and well built, but they became more a Land Rover shape and not like the Range Rover. And this time I'm assuming, this is me guessing again, that they knew they were building Defender and they had to make Disco more like the Range Rover again, as they did when it first was released.
So the thought there is that Discovery was a Defender replacement up until such time as they decided to do the new Defender, in which case we now need to figure out where to change the Defender again, or change the Discovery again, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, I heard somewhere that even the interior of the Disco 3 was sort of inspired by the Series 3 Land Rover. I can't remember where I saw that, though, but with all my research, I came across all sorts. But wittingly or not, the Disco 3 was very slab-sided and for the time, and very effective off-road. And if someone was to say right now, right, we've got to build a new Defender, what would you do? You'd make it effective for the time, slab-sided, and very effective off-road. So it's no fluke that they look well, they're both boxy. I wouldn't say they look the same, the new one and the Disco 3 or 4, but they're both boxy. The Disco 5, though, it's got a very long overhang, and that's to accommodate extra space inside, and the spare wheel. It's more practical. It's more use off-road and stop at the shopping centre and open the boot next to another car. I'm not sure how easy that's going to be with the new Defender. Obviously driven current Defenders, and when you open the rear door, it swings out quite a distance.
Yes, it can get away from you.
Yeah, that's right. And on a hill, and when if you've got one hand open, or if it's windy, that's right. So what they've done there is sacrificed function for everyday use for off-road. So the Defender really is a different animal to a degree. I know there's some similar tech or updated tech, but they've definitely gone all out to put off-roading first.
That's visible even in the factory options for a front-mounted winch, skid plates, and rear recovery points. They've really put all of that in there.
In fact, it's wonders what they've done with it, considering the leap. They know that the public were going to have a fit. Well, fans were. They couldn't do it any other way. They couldn't slowly, incrementally update it now and over the next 10 years. It had to be all in.
Well, they couldn't phase it in over 10 years because I don't think they plan on keeping this for 10 years. They haven't had a product cycle that long in quite a while.
That's it. I mean, the Mini, let's say like the original Land Rover, or let's say Lada in Russia. The mistake of making the same model is it's like a communist type of thing, making the same shape and same model for a long time is not very good business sense. Because innovation comes to a grinding halt, and so do sales. Because people, why would they go and get the next one if the old one looks exactly the same and you can just fix it?
It's the opposite of planned obsolescence.
Yeah.
Which is, you do want to update. You've seen that even with the Discovery and the Freelander and the Range Rover, there is a greater product cycle than they had in the past to keep the model fresh, and also with modern changes and modern updates. So it should apply to the Defender. I think your point, Harold, is correct that you're going to see a freshing of this probably every 2 or 3 years, maybe 5.
Well, yeah, and it's also about technology. In this day and age, you can't have something that grinds to a halt. Technology. Excuse me, my brain's just vacated. We know that the advancements are so rapid nowadays, and that means the laws are rapidly changed too. So they have to have the ability to completely revamp a model or replace it entirely within 6 to 12 years. The old format was never going to be that. It was never, ever going to be ready for a crash or any good in aerodynamic wind tunnels or even off-road compared to other models. We know that other models are very, very good off-road, and they're exceptional on the road.
Well, that's where the majority of the driving is going to take place, in whatever vehicle you're buying is going to be on the road.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just, that's a given. We have friends here in the Pittsburgh area. There's a Series 3, and we joke it never, the most it ever goes off-road is to go to Home Depot.
I understand that everybody keeps saying, well, you're not going to see many sheep thrown in the back of that, or bales of hay. Well, why not? But this is all preference.
Well, maybe not when it's new, but give it 10 years and people are going to start clapping on them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's completely fine to do that to it if you want to. But if you saw the interview I did with Bob Ives, he said the new Range Rover would do exactly what the Darien Gap Range Rover would do. And it would probably look a bit scuffed up when it's finished. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean it can't do it. It just means that people, when they're new, are reluctant to do it. And there's new Defenders, last of their kind, up to 2016, running around here, all spotless. They haven't been taken to farms either.
When's the last time a Defender was actually used on a farm like that was bought, say, within the last 10 years? I'm surprised. Yeah, I would be surprised. They were not bought for the utility factor that they were supposed to.
And the people making these claims about, farm this or in a war zone, they aren't farmers, and they're not in war zones either. They're fans, And I can see why they're making this point, because it's not intended for the same purposes, exactly the same purposes as the original, but the times are very, very different. When the Defender initially came out, times were different, even 30 years ago.
Summarized in one statement that you made in the video, which I noted down, I thought was very appropriate, was JLR needs to ignite passion with those not interested in the Defender.
Because Defender fans will be Defender fans until they die. It's the other people that they need to capture the imagination of, that spark, that love, that drew current fans towards them. And these people are people who have no real interest in old boxes that feel a little bit uncomfortable and strange and alien to them, and they want something that will start every morning and take them to work, even if they go off-road or not.
On the other hand, after spending some time in the new Defender, they might decide that they want to play with an old Defender just for fun.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
it might create some enthusiasts, maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they might go, you know what, I quite like this, but I'll try a Range Rover next time.
Right.
There might be a lot. So the thing is, without newer models and newer fans and not newer fans, how can I put it, a different generation of fans, you'll never know that. If the Defender name would taper off eventually and die if they didn't reinvent it. Well, you've got Jeep. Obviously, we have the Jeep in the US. It's very, very popular, and everybody knows about the Jeep too. But how many people know of the Willys Jeep? It wasn't called the Jeep, but the Willys. I mean, if they didn't carry on making the Jeep in its current form, how many people would know about the Willys today?
That's a very good point. Of course, this is when all the podcast listeners know I have to interject that we're near Pittsburgh, and that's where Jeep started in Bantam. In Butler.
But virtually nobody knows about the Bantam Jeep. They know about the Willys Jeep, but not the Bantam Jeep.
That's right. Well, there's the American Bantam, wasn't it, though? The UK
or
Bantam?
the Bantam Scout Car, as it was called back then.
That's right.
And that was Butler, Pennsylvania, which is an hour north of where I live.
And American Bantam used to be British.
Well, American Bantam actually was an American company, but they were building Austin 7s under license.
That's true. Sorry, yes, my bad. Yeah, that's true. Austin 7A. See, that was a significant vehicle too. So I was just thinking about Range Rover all of a sudden, because I find that Range Rover is another reason why Defender's popular in other countries, because I'm just trying to think how the name of other Land Rovers popped up in other countries that really had no interest prior to the Range Rover.
The Land Rover was out in most other countries, was it not?
Oh, absolutely. But the love affair that it has now is very different to, say, 60s and 70s and so on.
I see. And
because the Range Rover, it's kind of like a billboard. When the Range Rover became popular, people began to take note of other vehicles.
But see, the Range Rover was conceived to be a status symbol, and I think that really helped to boost the brand.
Yeah,
the Land Rover was designed to be a workhorse, which people appreciate but don't really make a big deal out of. But when you build something to be a status symbol, then all of a sudden it becomes popular.
That's actually true, but the Range Rover didn't start off that way. It started off as a workable tool. It actually had a solid floor that you can mop out, and basically had no, the floor was literally moppable.
But their target customer was a person of affluence. Therefore, it is a status symbol. It's a status symbol workhorse.
My understanding, though, it wasn't initially conceived to be that way. It became that very quickly when they realized like when it ends up in the Louvre and whatnot, and the interest in the type of customers that paid interest, then they played on that. Initially,
and then when they found out that customers liked a little bit of comfort and liked a little bit of sealed cabin so that the water didn't drip on their foot.
Yeah, that was the start. Yeah, I mean, I love the Land Rover, so I want people to know that when I say these negative things, they're not negative to me. They might be negative to the unwitting or non-fans. I mean, there's a reason why people go to Land Cruiser and G-Wagon. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why some people chose those vehicles over Land Rover, or chose Range Rover over Land Rover.
Oh, but it's also important to be realistic about the thing that you love, the thing that you like, that you're interested in, so that you understand what it is. Yeah. And then, as you say, if it's something you don't like, it's a mistake. If it's something you do like, well, it's charm, even though it's still a mistake.
I mean, there was a time when I would only ever think of having a series Land Rover. For a long time, until I was about 22, I think. I thought the Defender was a muggle. I thought it was not proper. I thought the Range Rover was just as bad, and Discovery, well, that was not worth looking at.
And then you grew up.
Yes, I did. I got my first Range Rover. No, my family had Range Rovers prior. When you're young and you're not even 10, and you're bouncing around the back of a 109 Series 2, let's say, and that's all great fun, and you hop in a Range Rover, everything's dialed down. All that over the top, bouncy and loud is all taken right down, and you're within reach as well of your parents who can get you for misbehaving. It's
the
that type
fun
of
out
thing.
of everything.
That's right. And nostalgia is a very potent, powerful tool. So when you're young, you grow up thinking that's how a Land Rover should, and you were really pig-headed. Well, I was anyway. And eventually I got my very own Range Rover and thought, oh, okay, this is a way to go. And then I got 110 and I got discos, lots of discos, and because they were a lot cheaper to get hold of. But I was just basically, it was an awakening. I was very ignorant. I chose to believe that what I grew up with was the way and only way to go. And there's probably some people who agree with that too. But they are aware, unlike I was, at least, that the others can be a better ride and better off-road.
Towards the end of the video, you made another interesting point that resonated with me, which is, and I think I noted this correctly. If I didn't, please correct me. That best is not necessarily legendary, iconic, or the greatest.
Yes.
And I thought that was good. And maybe we can break that down a little bit. That at least the way I took that is, if it's the best, then charm, mistakes, failures are probably removed from it, and then you may not have the love for it. At least I saw that as applying to Defender, very well.
Absolutely. Best as well, I suppose, could be slightly subjective, because a best tool for, say, me, completely objectively for me, is not going to be the same as, say, for a farmer. I was thinking purely in film terms, and hanging out the back of a tailgate of a vehicle and something that's really good on the road and off the road is sort of a sweet spot. And I always see Discovery as that sort of sweet spot. But it's not a legendary vehicle yet, and it's not greatest, because these things come with time and some subjectivity, maybe. I'm not sure. It's quite hard to describe a Disco. It's kind of like a traditional Land Rover back in the 80s. They're just about everywhere, and no one really pays too much attention to them. They just get on and do their thing. And I think as they're getting older, people are paying more attention to them, the classic ones. But that's how Land Rover was perceived here up until about the 80s, late 80s. And now they're this iconic tool, this legendary vehicle, and rightly so. They've covered a lot of ground in their time and been involved with some remarkable feats.
Done a lot of important things.
Absolutely.
Has they taken a Disco up a dam? I think not. No.
There's no dam that'll hold the weight of a Disco through.
But keep in mind that the Camel Trophy that was contested by Discos.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think again though, because the others were there first, it doesn't quite count in the psyche of many. Although the Disco is considered a very the Disco 1, the 200 TDI. A lot of people do like that because it was fairly robust for the time. I'm careful where I say this because as reliable as they were reliable for their time. They are easy to fix, but they're not as reliable as modern stuff. But modern stuff is trickier to fix for most people.
There's a trade-off between, total reliability and the ability to maintain and fix the stuff that does break.
Yes, and also that's it. And the other trade-off is performance and ability and security, safety. Right. Safety is a big deal for me. It's probably because I've been involved in a couple of accidents and I don't take it lightly.
Goes to the point I like to make about the American market and driving around the U.S. I have a 87 110. It's probably comfortable cruising speed is about 60 on the highway, and it's all the other cars around me that I'm more worried about. I'm less worried about what I'm doing than what's everybody else doing, because I'm going 10, sometimes 15 miles below what the flow of traffic is, and so I'm more often than not, am I looking in the behind me to see, is that person going too fast? Are they going to change lanes? But that goes to your point about the safety of it is, if I do get hit, I'm probably dead, at that speed.
Especially rolled. That's
yeah.
I don't want to frighten people either, because people go on motorbikes and they're aware of the risks, so they go anyway. And I completely understand this. Driving, you feel very connected to the road in an old Land Rover, in any old car really, and it's great fun. It's not effort. If you like driving, it's not effort. It's actually good fun.
Mm-hmm.
But the trade-off is, well, you're less likely to not only survive a smash, but avoid one. Modern vehicles, it's not just about the impacts rating, it's about the ability to avoid one entirely. They stop well, they have automatic braking as well, collision avoidance. So there's that comes into play too, and airbags. There's a trade-off for driving old versus new.
Absolutely. Well, that's really always been the case, because since the 50s especially, there's been classic cars, and they were always, even then the technology was at its time was a certain place, and then the old cars had older technology and they weren't necessarily as fun to drive because of those same reasons we're talking about now. I suspect you probably had the Cadillac owners saying, "Oh, I don't modern Cadillac owners, I don't have to light the light the wick for the headlights." Thank you very much. Thank you. It took a long time to get there, but
Painfully long.
Painfully, I was trying to think of something else, some other thing. Well, they didn't have.
Well, I mean, the first brag the Cadillac owners had was they didn't have to get out and crank it to get it started.
That's
There
a good
is
one.
that.
Right?
1911.
And you didn't have automatics until what? Till
1941.
till 41, and when was
Oldsmobile.
didn't permeate into the general population until probably the 50s, right?
And even then, it was an option. It wasn't the manual, which was called a standard. Today, the standard transmission is an automatic.
That's a good point.
And yeah, the manual is an option, and it's only available on certain models.
Which actually is a good point, maybe to transition to new Defender. That's the one thing that I did notice in the materials as the new Defender was revealed is absolutely no stick shift, no standard shift anywhere in the world.
Well, they can't. The problem is there's too many computers involved in the drivetrain. You can't have a person doing his thing while the computers are trying to manage all of it. It's just too much going on, and it becomes a reliability headache and a drivability headache both.
Yeah, and all the safety features are unavailable if somebody pushes in the clutch or does something interesting like that at the wrong time.
Yeah, and there's also the opulent part, or not opulent, second part, upmarket part.
I think that's the answer right there. I think is that they move Defender upmarket.
Yep, and people have said, well, why would they want to do that? You are right about the technology, though, of course. I mean, it plays much better if it's an auto box. But a lot of people are saying that, why don't they do it like the old one? Apart from the obvious, it wasn't selling. So the only way to change that is to make it a little bit more upmarket. But it doesn't mean it can't do what the old one could do. It's just cost a little bit more to do it. But there's a lot more car that you get from that money too. I mean, there's 110s, original 110s, the XS models were being sold for 35,000 here when they were available in 2013, I think. And you can get an entry-level new Defender for roughly that, I believe, which will have very good equipment as standard.
Let's go back to the new Defender and when the first time you saw it. I think you were with Brian Joslin and that group in Gaydon.
Yes, it was in July, and there was Auto Car and Car Magazine and Top Gear. They're all there.
What was the first impression?
Well, I was blown away. This is something else. I mean, it's very exciting. When you've lived around traditional stuff for a long time, you can't really imagine what a new one would look like. And then you see it. You see the pictures; they're all very nice and everything, but it doesn't do it justice. In the metal, it's a bit more. There's a bit more ore going on. Yeah, you can actually see it's a full spectacle. Still, I'm blown away by it, and I can't wait to get my hands on one. Brian
said in the metal, it's much more impressive. The size of it, it's bigger than you might think.
Yes, it is. It's a big vehicle. It's not small. It's. I think people think it's small. They thought that about the Disco 5, but the Disco 5 is actually bigger than the Disco 3. They were just, its pictures don't do it justice. And in person, it's a very big vehicle. Not silly big, if that makes sense. This is it's as big as your other Land Rovers. In fact, it's bigger. It's just because it can sit lower that it might not look in pictures so big.
I also think it's the way they did some of the metal, the shape of it, and also I think maybe some of the paint, just since it doesn't reflect, at least that's the main paint I've seen. I think they kind of diminishes it a bit.
Yeah, there's the aerospace flat matte look on the wrap that they put on it. It's very hard to explain. It's like you've seen pictures of Range Rovers, and then you've seen the L45, but you get close to it, and it's quite a majestically big thing. It's like that. Pictures don't really show the justice until you're up close with it.
And have you been able to drive one of the new Defenders?
I'm sad to say no, not yet. No one, as far as I know, no journalist, no one's had a go behind the wheel in one.
Well, there was some journalists back in April or May. Did they not get to go behind one? And they were passengers, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think they were behind the wheel. It's prototypes. I don't think anybody gets to drive. I don't know for sure, but I'm fairly certain no one's actually driven one yet. I mean, there'd be an article somewhere that everybody's passing around if that was the case. Someone would have written about it somewhere.
By the time our listeners hear this discussion, you'll have come out with your new Defender walk around.
Yeah, it's a sort of walk around. I come across very amateur in it, I'm afraid. I was all starstruck and a bit nervous.
And what's that going to be like? Is it similar to the other walk-arounds we've seen?
No, it won't be. I had to do something different. When I saw those, I immediately put a stop to what I was doing and then binned that edit. Finished off my feature one, which came out roughly the same time as everybody else's walk around, and changed the ending to that to set on a new course and went to a couple of Land Rover shows to finish off the film. You'll understand when you see it. I won't give too much away just right now, but I wanted to get some opinions from some well-known Land Rover types, even from the media. Try and spice it up a bit so it's not just my opinion and my view and so on.
So what did you change at the end of your 2-hour video? The ending, by the way, was really cool. A little bit of uplifting, and I was ready, even though I already knew what it looked like, I was ready to see it again.
Yeah, the ending's very different. That wasn't initial. The intro and the ending weren't there initially, and they did those last minutes. It was more generic at the time, and because it was meant to be part one of two, and now it's just a standalone.
You end with the best car is the one you have.
Yes, that's something I've heard that somewhere before. It's not mine. It's I heard it a long time ago, and I don't remember where I've heard it.
Isn't that usually? I've heard that in relation to cameras. The best camera you have is the one you have in your hand.
Yeah, that's what the best car is the one you love. I find a car is a very, very personal thing. Look at the effort people go to keep their house in a condition where they think the neighbors or they're happy with or friends are happy with, and yet people are far more likely to see you in a car. A car might save your life. It's certainly going to put food on your table. It's a very important tool. And a lot of people, I understand, use a car just for A to B because that's all it's for. But there's a lot of time in that A to B. So
they don't listen to our show, so they don't matter.
Yeah. Well, you might as well have something that's going to tickle your fancy between those hours of A to B.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we say, life is too short to drive boring cars.
Absolutely.
Definitely the case.
I don't know. It may have been Clarkson, one of his own not private, one of those non-Top Gear films that he was talking about. He does you see on YouTube, but occasionally, not recently, but some time ago. It may well have been one of his Change the World episodes. I'm sure he said something similar, like, the best car is the one you love. And I've stuck by that because if you get a kick from driving whatever it is you drive, no matter the make or model, then that's the thing you should drive. It makes your mundane every day, let's say if it is mundane, a bit more spicy, a bit more fruitful. Worth getting up.
What about the new Defender struck you, like when you first saw it? Are there a handful of things that particularly?
There's an awful lot. I was happy with the size straight away. The rear end, loved that. I love the sawn off shotgun rear end. It's just thunk. There is no rear end apart from next to no overhang. That's really pleasing if you're really into off road. That when you see that, then this thing means business. We didn't see it raised up, though. It was in access mode, if you want to call it, where it's fairly low down, so people can get in it.
I believe we'd call that gangsta mode.
Gangsta mode, yeah. That's it. Well, I've said in my film, my mother couldn't go in the 110 that I was driving. She couldn't get into it. She's just not nimble enough, and that's a problem if you wanted to take. I believe in air suspension. I've never.
Well, that's the argument for having a P38.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of air suspension, and they've ironed out a lot of kinks over the years. Since the P38 arrived. Actually, it wasn't the P38. It was the last of the classics. The soft dash.
The long wheelbase ones, yeah.
Yeah, and normal, just the 4-door normal as well. I had a 93, and it wasn't even a soft dash classic, and that was air sprung. And there was a lot of gremlins in the system back then, and a lot of people had them converted to coil to avoid all that. I'd never do that. I've just put up.
Yeah, in the industry, that's called castration.
Yes, I really like air suspension. And they have ironed out a lot of kinks. I've had 2 Disco 3s, and I've roughly done about 100,000 miles between the two. And in terms of the airbags, I've never had an issue, and I've had to replace one compressor because it went noisy. Other than that, I've had no issues.
Yeah. The compressor was undersized on those. That was the big problem there.
Right. See, I don't know. I know that I know bits and bobs. I hear a lot, but I just replace it and I'd never convert it to coil. That'd be oof. I'm a big fan of air suspension.
It's good stuff when it's working properly, and they aren't that hard to get working properly. It's just they're a little fiddly because they were overly complicated and when they didn't really need to be.
Well, yeah, usually it's the dryer unit that fails on the Disco 3 suspension.
Yeah, and the problem with the earlier ones is that dryer unit and the plumbing was undersized, and the way that dryer unit was like in the middle of the link and everything had to go in and out through that, it overcomplicated the valve body.
That's right, because it had to return the air that way as well to help.
Right.
So I mean, they've come a long way even since the D3. It's 2004 car.
Right.
They've ironed out a lot of kinks. You don't really hear about modern Land Rovers having suspension issues.
So what other new Defender aspects, features?
Right. I'm a big fan of the Series 2A. I grew up. Well, no, I mean,
Good man.
It was the Land Rover that I had at the time when I passed my test. So I did a lot of miles in that. I'd had Land Rovers before that, but it was the one I had when I passed my test. It was a 109 2A, and that dash layout, which is fairly similar to the new Defender's dash. So I was a big fan of that straight away. The interior is definitely one of its fortes. They've really thought hard about that, and it's definitely for today, but it's for everybody that's got muddy boots and big gloves too. I'm absolutely thrilled about the interior. I love that the doors don't go when you close them. I love that it's just like like a Range Rover. I like that it seems very meaty. Even though it's modern, it seems very meaty and very user friendly, even though it's laden with tech. Oh, also sitting in it, you definitely get that. I can't remember what they call it. There's a term that they use for Range Rovers.
You mean the
it's not quite like that.
High position seating? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's command driving.
Command driving.
You definitely get that. So you can see over the bonnet nicely. But the bonnet's there. You're very, like in a series and an Defender, you're very aware of the bonnet. But it's in a good way, and it's the same.
Especially if you've widened the tires, and you become very aware of the bonnet and the tire that's on top of it.
Yeah, that's right. I know that they're not putting a tire on the bonnet anytime soon.
No. But I mean, that in the series, that was definitely the thing, and that was kind of an iconic look everybody asks about.
I'd say as well that approach, departure angles, and so on. It was wonderful to see that. It's that they're going to try and do something like that, but when you actually see it, it's kind of like I don't know. When people talk about the pyramids of Giza, and they show you pictures, and you go, yes, it's very nice, but then one day you turn up there and have a look for yourself, and it's very different. It's exactly what you thought, but better. It's that type of thing when you see the Defender, the new one.
So it's actually better in person than it is in the photograph?
Yes, a lot better. I also like the layout. I mean, finally, you've got a load bay that's practical. The rear door is wider than the original, so you can actually fit things in it.
Oh.
And obviously they've got no, what would you call those in the back end, at the back of a tub of a Defender, the steps basically. They kind of hindered the vehicle greatly in terms of load capacity. So you can actually put the seats down now and lay flat. Well, you can at my height. I'm 6 foot and I look like a prat doing it.
Will you be sleeping in the back?
I would, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of keeping things immediate, and having to look for hotels in the middle of nowhere and walk away from your gear that's in the car. It's not what I'd like to do. So sleeping in the car, much better.
So what didn't you like about the new Defender? Did anything strike you as that you didn't particularly enjoy?
Yes, it's not a case of didn't like. I appreciate why it's there, and I understand entirely why, but the rear door, as much as I love the way it's all cut off, so there's no overhang, I also think that it's a bit of a problem for me in terms of my preference is a split tailgate. I can dip in, pull my cameras out, or hang out the back of the tailgate, or shoot under the canopy that the tailgate offers. And the door that swings open isn't as practical.
Well, with the split tailgate, you can actually drive with it open.
Yeah. There's a lot of things you can do with a split tailgate. You can open it in a car park when there's a car behind you. You can do just a lot of things.
Well, you can open the other one in a car park too. You pull real hard and the other one will move out of the way for you.
That's true. There is that too. But that's it. And it's a preference thing. It's not dislike, it's a preference for me. I mean, lots of other people, they're going to think, well, I'm going to be doing some serious off-roading and some mega overlanding, and I want that spare wheel where I can get at it, and I don't want an overhang. And it's plenty big enough for me to put stuff in, so they'll be very happy with it. Other than that, actually, I can safely say it's probably the most exciting Land Rover I've seen in a long time.
I liked it first time I saw it. I thought they did a good job.
Did you see it in Germany or?
No, I watched it live over the internet. I got up at what was it, 4 a.m. here in the U.S.
Yeah, it's.
Gee, thanks for your largest car market that you want to bring this new vehicle back into. Let's have the debut at 4 a.m. That was
Well, it's either that or they make everybody in Germany come back in at 2 a.m. So it's.
They could have waited 5 hours and maybe done it at a little more reasonable time.
Yeah, but so could you.
No, that was not my.
You could have waited 5 hours, gotten up, and still watched it. It was still available to see.
I wanted to see it live. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and the difference was what?
I was able to want to be one of the first people to see it live. Thank you.
Okay, and a year from now, the difference will be what?
So, Thomas.
Yes. So obviously, America, I'm assuming everybody that you know in America is very excited to get their hands on this Defender.
I'm not too sure about that.
I think there's a lot of purists that,
Yes.
that are underwhelmed, but I think there's a lot of people that are curious to know what it is and what it's going to be, because we've been in such a Defender vacuum.
I'd agree with that. I think the purists, the originalists, the traditionalists, whatever you want to call them, there was a wait and see as we started this conversation. Those who wanted a Defender have one, or will get one, and will probably buy, get a used one that's one of the originals from the 80s at this point. If you're lucky to live in Canada, you have 15 years. But I think this is a whole new market that Land Rover is going to try to tap into. That's what and as you've said, that's who they're aiming for. And they do see America as their largest market, and I think it will sell. Biggest concern is the price, but that may, in fact, maybe that won't be an issue. The purists and the originalists, they'll probably not wave when they see one go down the road.
That's for sure. I think, though, when people talk about the price, yes, it's expensive, I suppose, compared to, say, a Ford Ranger or vehicles of that caliber.
Wrangler.
On the other hand, the Series 1 in 1948 was £468, I think, to buy, on an average income of £204 a year. The average income in this country now is just shy of $30,000 a year. There's a lot of variables to add to that, post-war Britain and so on, but still, it's actually a better value vehicle than the Series 1 was, if we look at it from that angle.
That's it.
And relative to multiples of annual income, average annual income.
Sure, there's a lot of variables.
So the affordability factor.
The Defender, the outgoing Defender, was cheaper, but no one was buying it. So we know price isn't really the real issue. I know it's different in the States because you couldn't have one at all, but let's say in this country and in Europe, people weren't buying them. I'm pretty sure over time that would have probably been the case in the States too, maybe.
People never seem to appreciate what they have.
I don't think it would have sold. It didn't sell when it was here in the mid-90s. It goes back to nostalgia and fantasy.
And again,
what could it have been? What might it be? What does it allude to in your mind? Because we know this from watching all the safari and wilderness videos or movies and documentaries at the time. Was always a Land Rover in there, and I think it gave
but those aren't the people you need to worry about, because those people, if they recognize they want one, they're going to have one regardless of price. But the problem is, if you're trying to acquire new Land Rover owners from people who have never had one before and have never had the interest before, you're trying to inspire those people. Price is a factor, and there's enough other vehicles out there that are similar, maybe not as capable, but similar at a much lower price point, and that's your competition.
This is true. Again, though, it's tricky, isn't it? Because these other vehicles, they're not newer. People, if they can afford it, may think, I think I'll go for the more expensive one.
Well, yeah, as long as it's not 3 times as much. If it's a little more to get something that's newer and perhaps more high tech, that's a selling point.
Yeah, I mean, there is that Land Rover tax. This is me not knocking Land Rover or anything, but their name, their brand it's not mainstream. It's fairly niche.
Well, point that you made about the Range Rover, in that all other manufacturers copied it, emulated it, which you left out of your video, by the way, to the point where BMW buys Land Rover just to get the Range Rover information.
Yeah, just to get the technology.
New technology.
Yeah.
And
that was actually the original cut, but I just didn't want to bog people down with too much detail. That was
fair enough. Well, I said it out loud, by the way, so for you. So
yeah, corporate raiders, really corporate ransackers, if you will.
But that applies. I think that's going to apply now to the new Defender. I suspect that you're going to see Toyota, Jeep, maybe even Mercedes take a look at this and start to make changes to and start to copy and emulate some of the new Defender.
Well, I do say that in the film. I actually say.
Did you? I apologize. I didn't write that down. I'm sorry.
It's okay. In the film, I say that really you'll see that Jeep and so on will have no choice. They have the same hurdles. They have to face the same hurdles as Land Rover. It's just that Land Rover have gone for it first. The safety and ability and on-road performance, all those things, as well as trying to look good, they've all come into play, and they've decided to do it finally with the Defender. I mean, they know how to anyway with the Range Rover. And you'll see now that out of those big three, they say Wrangler and G-Wagon and basically vehicles of that caliber, Defender is the first one to go full modern. It always surprises me that fans of Land Rover don't really talk much about Range Rover. Every time I post a picture, there's not much of a fuss made of Range Rovers, and it's always.
I think maybe it's your current audience. None of us are huge Range Rover people, and to be honest, we're kind of tired of having our Land Rovers referred to as Range Rovers by people who don't understand the difference.
Okay.
It's an American problem.
Call them Jeep over there as well.
Yeah, it gets caught. I have bumper stickers that say it's not a fucking Jeep.
Yeah, that's the thing. People keep saying that the new Defender is just another Range Rover, and I say in the film that actually, for the most part, a lot of Land Rovers and Defenders were based on the Range Rover underneath.
Well, yeah, the first thing to be called a Defender was all Range Rover mechanically.
That's right. Yeah, and it's not a bad thing to adopt.
No, that's
tech. Yeah.
To the
Range
point
Rover was kind of the cutting edge of Land Rover's technology, and then as it became more mature, it got moved into the cheaper models to make room in the Range Rover for more cutting edge.
Yeah, that's right. I think that without the Range Rover, Land Rover would be as popular as Rover right now.
Well, I mean, the Range Rover kind of provided good R&D for the more mainstream models, if you will.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really. It's the Range Rover thing. It's I've got a film on that coming soon too. It's there's a lot more to the Range Rover, I think, than people. I think though it's because it doesn't look so militant and things like that, and the history behind it is a bit more obscure than Land Rover's more traditional model.
Yeah, it's definitely an American problem, I guess, when you have your friends call your Land Rover a Range Rover and you have to explain to them where you finally give up and not worry about it anymore.
Well, it's the same here, but with Jeep and here, the only Land Rover that was not called a Jeep was the Range Rover. It's the one that actually stood aside,
Is that because it was positioned as an upscale vehicle?
I don't know.
I've always thought that was the case.
I think because it doesn't look militant, or at least,
and it doesn't even look remotely Jeep-like, to be honest.
Well, there is that too. Whereas if you had a 4-track or an early Land Cruiser and things like that, they would have been the common slur was to call them Jeeps for a long time. Still is some.
Yeah, Range Rover definitely gets a pass on the Jeep marker. You never hear that over here in the U.S. And Range Rover is considered very upscale, high-end vehicle, even if it's just a base model.
Yeah, can I ask you a question, you guys? So what do you think it is about Range Rover's success? Because it is a fairly successful vehicle. I'm just curious.
I think it's opulence. I think the fact that it is upscale.
It's the status symbol. It's the perception of affluence because you're able to have a Range Rover.
I get that, but is there any because you also know as well that you can get old ones for £900 in this country, and
the general populace in this country doesn't know that. They think they're all expensive, and of course,
yes,
back when the product cycles were longer, it was more difficult to tell whether it was new or used.
That's true,
and it's sort of a timeless design. So even a 98 P38 today, if it's shiny, people won't know that it's an old vehicle.
Obviously, do you think that reinventing the model over every, say, roughly 10 to 12 years was a good move too?
There's pros and cons to it.
It was probably a good thing. Models here reinvented very, I don't know, it almost seems like every 3 years now. That seems the model cycle's
that's
gotten
done
shorter.
To sell more cars. You can't, you convince people to sell the new one by telling them the new one is so much better than the old one that it's replacing. Now, you don't want that old one. You want this new one, and so they sell more stuff that way. Whether it's better or not, it's different and it's new, so therefore it must be better.
It also drives innovation, though, I imagine, because if you're fighting competition from the likes of even Rolls-Royce nowadays, try improvements are just that, even if it's not a major improvement. And perhaps if Defender did the same thing, this uproar wouldn't be such an uproar, and we might have a much better Defender by now even.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. The thing about to go back to the American market, you're probably aware of this, but the SUV, which is what the Range Rover is considered, is king, and that seems like what everyone's moving to the point where several manufacturers, including Ford, it says they're not going to produce sedans anymore because they're not selling, and that's just where the market is. So Range Rover set the mark and was the mark, is the mark, and probably wants to be the gold standard, if you will. That's the American market. They want large, nice to cruise in, go down the highway, comfortable.
Supersize me.
Supersize, even F-150s, a Ford F-150 pickup truck, which you could probably say akin to a Land Rover, and wait for my analogy here. In the early days was a simple, basic truck, bench seats, all metal.
Right, it was designed for the farmer and the tradesman.
And now you can buy an F-150 Platinum, all decked out with 4 seats, 4 doors, and it's so quiet, and they have to pump in engine noise through the audio system so you can hear the outside world. And that's, I think, the same thing. That's what Range Rover is to Land Rover and the other models.
Well, that's a sign of times, though, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you go back to, let's say, smartphone, and we think about, say, just the Samsung Galaxy Note 4, you could take the back off that and replace the battery, and it felt fairly robust in comparison to, say, the Note 10. But there's a trade-off there. It wasn't waterproof, and it wasn't as powerful, and it wasn't as user-friendly.
But you could take it on an airplane. You
could, but how often are people on their airplane? And that's one model. You're thinking of Note 7 now, aren't you?
Yeah, the one that catches fire, yeah.
Yeah, the Note 7. I think people keep saying, well, a really indestructible phone that people should have is the 3310 by Nokia, which is great if you only ever want to send a text message and talk. But if you want to do a lot more than that.
Well, I'm of the belief that's telephones should be telephones, and if you want a computer, get a computer
or have it all in one.
But then you compromise everything. It does none of those things as well as it could be if it was.
Not if the computer's stopping your car from hitting something that you're not aware of.
That's what eyeballs are for.
Yeah, that's true. But unfortunately, the human eyeball just doesn't react quite as well as people like to think. I'm all for.
Well, especially if they haven't trained themselves to, because I've got this phone to do it for me. I don't have to be alert.
Yeah, I understand that. I think there's.
Yeah, we can argue for an hour and a half. Just get me started, buddy.
Well, that's okay. I did. It was in the original cut. The stats for automotive technology, the lives saved. It's incredible.
Well, that's across the whole board of of the automotive industry. Absolutely.
Yeah. And also the efficiency when a problem does occur. When it's all working tip-top and fine, the efficiency is colossal in comparison to an old carburetor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Injection is much superior to a carburetor, without a doubt.
I mean, I'm quite a tech person. I'm not afraid of it. I understand, though, when it can go wrong, it can be kind of problematic. But it's a problem that can be overcome. Right,
but technology for the sake of technology purely is misguided use.
Well, yeah, I guess.
No,
that's debatable. Because
John.
No, technology goes back to the beginning of time, and technology was always a tool.
Technology needs to have a reason to be. If you're just adding technology so you can say you've added technology, then you're misguided. Just because you can do something a different way doesn't mean you need to.
No, I don't.
Unless you can provide a good reason why it's better.
I'm looking for a specific. You need to have a specific example. Just throwing a broad brush out there, I can't agree with that. That's not what technology is. You wouldn't agree with
me anyway. So what's the difference?
No, that's not necessarily. I agree with you on a number of things. I just can't agree with you on that one.
In my Discovery 3, and I never thought I'd care for that. And now I've got them. I'd prefer to have them all the time in case I needed them. Need is kind of subjective. It depends on the individual. Needs vary. I mean, how many people actually need a four-wheel drive?
Correct.
Far fewer than what own it.
Yes.
Most. I'd say 99.9% of people don't need a four-wheel drive of any kind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can put snow chains. You can put snow chains on a two-wheel drive like they had been doing for a long time in colder climates and just plod it along. It's just a nice
thing. Or learn to drive.
Well, there is that too. Yeah, and it's a nice thing to have. Like lots of things on cars from the last 40 years, maybe it's a nice thing to have and not need than need and not have.
Well, it goes back to your point about of the time, as everything has progressed. Some better, some not for the best, maybe or not as good, but it is still of the time, and that's where kind of bringing this back around. A new Defender is of the time, and it hasn't been of the time for a long time.
That's the thing. I mean, the engines have been not too bad. The upgrades, some of them, again, though, the more modern they got, the trickier they were to figure out if they went wrong. overall, the structure of it hasn't really changed since '83.
You did get to drive the Defender Works V8, which looked pretty interesting.
I did, not for a great length of time though, and that was a prototype number 2. That one, it felt like a very tight unit because it's basically brand new, but it was very twitchy. It has the typical throttle bounce that Defenders come with as well. So when you've got all that horsepower, you've just got to be careful how you use your throttle foot, basically. It was a worry because it was a rare one and very expensive, and great fun though because it sounded brilliant. I'm a child when it comes to a nice V8, and in that vehicle being so special, because I was meant to be filming and talking to camera, I was a bit my priorities were a bit shot at that point because I didn't want to talk to camera. I just wanted to enjoy it. So that's why
you just want to listen to the noises.
Yep, that's why. So it was edited in such a way that it looked like I was there for the audience, but really I was there for me at that point.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
You couldn't help but be Clarkson for a while.
Yep, it was fantastic. I can see if I had the money, I'd have one of those just as an investment, never mind to play with. It was just unbelievable machine. But there's nothing really new to it. It's significant. It's the last hurrah. It carries that massive lump, sounds brilliant, and if you had the money, it'd be worth having for sure.
But on the other hand, if you don't have the money, there are plenty of guys that can do it in the aftermarket for you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I had a 100-inch Land Rover myself, and that was a V8 and very nice and roll cage. The work sounded great. It's just that it wasn't as significant as that one.
There's some significance to it being done at the factory. Yeah, I know.
And it's nice to have an auto. Mine was actually auto because it was a Range Rover underneath. It's nice for certain things, not descending but ascending. It's nice to have an auto box, I find.
They're useful for towing as well. They apply the torque through the drivetrain much smoother. I will give you that.
And you're probably less likely to find backlash in the drivetrain too overall.
Well, again, because it applies the torque more smoothly, it doesn't hammer everything. And of course, if you really know what you're doing and you're concentrating on your driving, you can minimize that. But people over the lifespan of the vehicle tend not to do that.
Yeah, that's very true.
Land Rover photo album, where did that come from? How did that start?
I'd been quite ill up until about 2013, and I had problems where I couldn't walk really. And I discovered Instagram. I started putting some pictures on. It was just a new thing to do while I was in bed. And it sort of grew from there on. I was probably one of the first on there, so it was good timing. And other people sent me their pictures, and it just became a sort of nucleus at the time. And then other people realized they could do it themselves, and which is good because I love the fandom. I love seeing other people's work, other people's locations and other people's vehicles, and love for it. And it just built rapidly. It wasn't exactly planned. So it's just a big fandom thing, really.
And you have been an automotive journalist all your life?
No. I've worked in media, mostly as a cameraman and editor, but never for automotive. Although my entire family, they're all automotive, and I've been raised with an automotive background. So that's probably given me a little bit of insight. Basically, the entire family are mechanics and engineers and own vehicle breakers yards and things like that. So I've had a better than average insight.
So starting the photo album is what now makes you call yourself an auto journalist?
I don't call myself that.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm a fan. That's all I am.
All right, fair enough.
Other people have called me that because of the films. But no, I'm not really an automotive journalist. I'm literally
except when Land Rover's inviting you to show up, and then
I'm a journalist. Yeah, you're right. I am. Yeah, that's being a fan. It's kind of like I don't know, Axl Rose asking you to come backstage and have a look at his microphones or something. You just look up. You don't know what to do with yourself, really. Right. I've been very fortunate. Land Rover they've been very welcoming to me. Maybe it's the fandom I think they see, and probably the audience too.
So the photo album is now branched into a YouTube channel?
It had some time ago, but I put just 2 projects up at the time to secure the name and make sure no one takes the Land Rover photo album name and whatnot. And just to show that I could do something whilst I built other features. So there'll be more features coming in succession. They're all pretty much done. Just that it's all timing, really. I don't want things to go off half-baked, so I'm a bit funny about letting things go. Probably a bit nervous, I think, a bit shy. I don't want to do the fandom a disservice.
So what's coming up on that we need to look for?
Range Rover, Discovery, Freelander, Velar, just everything, really. Also, I'm doing Jimny versus Defender. I've got a Jimny.
Right on.
Yep, because this whole thing about the Jimny, what I can say right now is I don't know many. Mm-hmm. In concept, it's a nice little idea. but no Land Rover.
Something else we can't get here.
Really? Oh.
No, nope.
Well, I don't know many people who are Land Rover owners who would be desperate to get hold of one of those. It's no real difference between the previous one that you can find for about £500 here.
Adam Bennett.
That's the I've got his. I've got his Jimny. Yeah,
Nice.
And we've got a few things lined up for that, including something with the new Defender.
Sweet.
So it's a bit of it's not people might think when it comes out it's clickbait, but it's not. It's going to be completely real, and it's just I'm fortunate to have Adam as not a sponsor as such, just a friend who doesn't mind loaning me vehicles.
Yeah, mind you, in all fairness, Adam Bennett is not exactly the average Land Rover owner.
No, Adam's very tenacious and he's very able as well. He takes to things and just goes for it.
The world's most confident man.
Absolutely, and he's got good reason to. He doesn't fail at anything, does he? You know, he's a very able person.
No,
nothing. He's unstoppable.
Yeah, have you met him or?
He's been on our show.
Oh, has he now?
We talked for so long, it became 2 shows.
Right.
Yeah, that's our quintennial extravaganza.
60 and
60 and 61, yes.
Yeah. Adam is he's brilliant. Fortunately, we get on really well as well. So he's
and we had a hard time containing him to just 2 episodes.
Right. Lots of editing.
Yeah. No, actually, just said no. He's point and shoot. You know, just let him go.
We had to stop trying to ask him questions. Yeah. We just kept it rolling, and he just kept talking.
Yeah, that's Adam. It's a good thing. I think it's a brilliant thing. There's never a dull moment with Adam.
I think we hit him at the right time because he had all of the information in his head about retrieving Oxford from Ascension Island, and we gave him the outlet to download all that info in the form that was best for him.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I've made a film with Oxford too as well, and Cambridge. I was meant to go on the current expedition, but there was too much problem. Well, too much. I have to stay. Basically, have to remain. So I'll be meeting them in Slovakia, I think, and driving back to the UK.
Oh, great!
With Cambridge and Oxford. Yeah.
So the PAC 519 what's that vehicle about? That's not the original Cambridge.
No, that's the one prior. The year before, there was a Trans-African expedition.
The Cape Town run.
That's right, and they did 20 to 25,000 miles in that. So that's before Oxford. And it was the one that inspired and gave the initial go-ahead for the Singapore run.
That's the pre-Cambridge, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. And on that journey, they were called Oxford and Cambridge too. It's something that carried on over a few expeditions.
PAC 519 is Adam located and restored that also.
That's right. Yeah, and he's got others that he's restoring. I won't talk about them, but
yeah, I know. I should probably.
That's up to Adam.
Yes.
I know that I'll be getting my hands on them soon, but they're exciting, significant Land Rovers too. He's got some reach that way. He really finds all sorts.
Doesn't he? I know.
One thing, I don't know if you saw a white Defender that I was driving in the film, in the white 90.
Soft top?
Yeah, we've had no top on. It's actually got a roof back on it now. But that one, he's offering to give away to anybody that's got one of the other significant Land Rovers he's looking for, which I should have had those written down, but I'm making a film on that. So when you watch the film, you'll be able to see he's going to give it to anybody that's got whatever's left.
Interesting reward package.
Yeah.
Well, he's done it before.
That's a good way of doing it.
And it's the last of its kind. It's only got 6,000 miles on the clock.
As I recall, he did that with Oxford when he found it. He offered the brand new 90 sitting in his driveway, but that was too new and therefore not good enough.
That's right. So he lifted the engine out and put, I think it was a 200 TDI in or something?
300.
Oh, that's it, 300, yeah, and then sent it that way. Yeah, Adam not much stops Adam when he puts his mind to it.
He doesn't.
And he's like a bloodhound with a bag of spanners.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, it's great fun to watch him do his stuff. He's nothing flaws his perspective on things.
So tell us about your Land Rover heritage. When did you remember Land Rovers for the first time? Were you a young kid?
I was raised in them from a very young age. I think the first one I remember was sitting in the back of a Series 1, just bouncing away from around North Wales. I learned how to drive in one too. This might sound a bit oof, but I was conceived in one. I was conceived in a 2A109.
That's
right on.
There's that too.
That's that's fantastic. I loved it.
We had lots.
And do you still have that truck?
No, I don't know where that is. It was one of my dad's breakdown recovery Land Rovers. So he he would do a lot of, well, his whole business at the time was recovery and vehicles dismantling, scrapyard.
So you were conceived in an old tow truck.
Yeah, and it was not tow, like it didn't have a big towing thing on the back. He just used to recover it with an A-frame or something, and it was and it had his name on the side of it, and he'd have tools in the back. Well, obviously not at that point, but yeah. So there is that. He was not really a big fan of them.
You should put Adam on the case to find that truck.
Yeah, it probably doesn't exist. My father probably broke it, but I actually asked him. He's broke. I think he broke like 15,000 vehicles in his time.
Oh wow!
So there's so many. The history is quite vast in my family of Land Rovers. Myself, I've had over 100. And
damn.
Yeah, and I've got my ultimate garage like everybody. In the real world, I think the new 110 would go down nicely, But when you've got that fictitious amount of money in your head, and you think, well, there's no limit, then I would have an early Suffolk Range Rover, and I'd have a 2A109, an 84 V8 110 with the county stickers going right down it, and yeah, I'd love that. I love the 80s.
I have an 84 110 in my shop right now, but thankfully it is devoid of those god awful county stickers.
That's what I like about them. I love them.
Well, you can have them.
Yeah, that's
I run across spare county stickers. I'll mail them to you because I can't get rid of them fast enough.
Well, that's nostalgia. You see, what should be thrown away and whatnot is sort of sought after. Nostalgia is a very powerful tool. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of stuff. I've had an awful lot of discoveries. I think they're an entry-level Land Rover that's most have had to. Defenders are very expensive nowadays, but discoveries are still fairly cheap. So people are trying to get to Land Roverdom straight away. Discovery,
especially in this country, they're sort of the gateway drug because they're cheap and plentiful. In fact, a lot of guys say they're the new series truck.
Yes, I've been trying to say that. Yeah, they're cheap, cheerful, and very effective for the money.
And I use them as parts trucks to keep Defenders on the road too. So
that's it. A lot of people have discoveries, but there's not as much love as there is for Defender, which is always baffled me a little. But
you need to come to the U.S.
They're not as iconic.
Yeah, you need.
There is that.
They're not the same kind of thing because they're harder to keep going because you can't just unbolt one body panel because they're all welded together and they rust.
Yeah, they're not short of the rust. I think that if you've had enough series Land Rovers, though, they're actually quite rust-worthy as well.
Well, there are certain places where they do rust, and there's places where the aluminum turns to dust. But the point is you can unbolt those bits and bolt other ones on and keep on going, whereas a Defender being a welded-together shell or the Disco being a welded-together shell, it's much more difficult to do that.
Yes, usually the rear floor that needs cutting out and replacing. But if you've ever had a series Land Rover, you know that the steering idle is, well, when that gets welded into the chassis by itself, that's a trick.
There's a couple forums where there's a perpetual discussion on the best way to remove the steering relay.
Yeah, that's we've had the roof off an entire building almost lift off it because we had a massive, basically thingy jack positioned on one, and we tried to jack it, and the roof started to go out before the steering idle would pop out. So in the end, we had to cut the whole front cross member off.
Yeah, that's another way to do it.
I think Disco's a very fascinating vehicle, probably because they're an underdog. So I keep giving them a lot of love when I get a chance.
They get a lot of love here in the U.S. I think that's since we didn't have Defender, I think the Discovery kind of fulfilled that role.
Yeah, I think, definitely in that regard. I think the hardcore people who would have built up Defenders over in Europe have built up Discos in this country. It's a different crowd that has Defenders in that regard, I think.
It's amazing, isn't it? The contrast in fandom. That's what makes Land Rover quite a special brand, really.
So are there any trucks that stand out that you owned that you wish to share with us?
Well, I loved my one. I had an 89 110 station wagon. I really liked that. That was my first Land Rover that wasn't leaf sprung, other than a Range Rover. I mean, the first traditional shape Land Rover. And my first Range Rover, because it was such an eye-opener. And I did about 30,000 miles in that. But I also did an awful lot of off-road in it. It didn't look very Range Rover-ish when I'd finished with it. It was a bit dented and a bit scuffed, and I ripped the spoiler, the valance, whatever you want to call it, off the front, did all sorts with it. And I'm not pleased with that, but I did have a lot of fun, so I am pleased with it. Yeah, the 10928, just because it was the first Land Rover I had when I passed my test. So I took a lot of friends out in that, and don't know, it just seems very hard to match that feeling of being free. Although I didn't have much money, and the starter motor was broke. And so for 9 months, I parked it on hills to start it every morning. But that's what you do. That's just the love.
With a couple of hills and a manual transmission, who needs a starter?
Right, exactly. And I only had 205s on it because I couldn't afford 750s. So it looked like it was on casters. But I didn't care. I felt great in it. I felt fantastic in that machine.
Yeah, it's independence, is it not?
Absolutely. Even though you've only got about £3.50's worth of fuel at any given time, so that means you can probably only do about 30 miles, but still, it's still more independent than 3 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but it just limits the scope of how much trouble you can get into if you can't go that far from home, right?
Absolutely. It didn't stop me, though. I did get stuck a few times and had to call out friends. And I say friends, I mean family. And I say family, I mean very disappointed in me family at the time. But
I mean,
is there any other kind?
Your father who had got the wrecker, right?
Yeah, but it is such fun, you know. It was probably because I had casters as well. I kept getting beached on normal tractor tracks and things, but it was still worth it.
Now, did you get out of the UK to drive your vehicles, or were you mainly in the UK?
No, I was mainly in the UK.
Okay.
In fact, I've not driven a Land Rover abroad yet.
In your video, you talked about left-hand drive versus right-hand drive, and mocking some of us Americans having to drive on the.
That's right. That's the American market. It's very important to Land Rover. It's hugely, and always has been, especially post-war. I imagine it's very important now as well. You guys obviously have a love for Defender, and they're aware of that. And they're obviously hoping to crack America. People who weren't interested in Range Rover and probably weren't interested in Discovery are probably going to be interested in Defender this time around.
Well, that's the reason for doing it, I think. Bring in more people than what are already aware of Discovery and Range Rover.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I can't wait to drive this new Defender on the road to see what its road manners are like. I'm fairly sure it's going to be utterly brilliant off-road from what I've heard from people, but it'd be nice to find out what it's like on the road, because that actually means a lot to a lot of people who are unfamiliar with the older Land Rover, and people in general who aren't Land Rover fans, but they just might like the look of that vehicle that sounds like this thing called Defender that they've heard so much about.
Well, and if they really want to bring in those people, the people that aren't Land Rover people who aren't into off-roading, it has to be good on-road.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that the simplicity of this vehicle, even though it's not a simple vehicle, I think that's going to be a winner. I don't think a lot of people like clutter, tons of buttons, things like that. And that's something that they've obviously thought about. The layout of the interior, which is a place that most people live with, because when you're in the car, you can't see the outside. And I think that it being a very nice, effective place to be means a lot.
Well, that's, I think, a case of effective use of technology. Because you can have touch screens now, everything can be funneled into that one screen. It does allow them to limit the number of buttons and switches and sliders and all those things. In some ways, it was good they waited till now for some of those kinds of aspects of being able to make the kind of a simple.
Now they've actually found out a lot of the bugs in air suspension, let's just say. It's great that they're bringing out a Defender with this level of stable technology.
Well, and that technology has been tested for the last several years in a Discovery.
That's right, yeah, and in the Range Rover, and they've stood on the shoulders of all that and obviously updated it again. I know a lot of people have their doubts. This is traditionalist, that is, or people used to the previous Defender. But that Defender itself has issues, and people are okay with that, because it's familiar issues, I suppose.
So why didn't they call it Defender 2?
I think they're dropping, I don't know if you noticed this, but they've dropped their number scheming.
No, that's true. They don't do Discovery 5.
Discovery is just called Discovery now, and Evoque, the Evoque 2 is just Evoque.
Yeah.
And I think because they figured out maybe that with Range Rover, they've never had Range Rover 1, 2, or 3. It's only people like us that call it P38, L322. Everybody else is just a Range Rover. So I think they're just going with that simplistic look at things. Maybe it sounds more suave. Unless it's Chanel number 5.
Maybe, indeed.
I'm not sure exactly why. I'm guessing it's because it stops the clutter and maybe depreciation in some way.
So, Thomas, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Across social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
And that's all Land Rover photo album. That's all the same account?
One word. Yeah, all one word, same account.
I highly recommend everybody check out your 2-hour, 15-minute, and 50 seconds video on essentially your love letter to Defender. I think it was fantastic, and I'm glad you did it.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you watched it. I'm glad that so many people thought so highly of it. It's wonderful to see like-minded fans just watching what you put together and thinking along the same lines. I
actually had 2 or 3 people message me and say, "Did you watch this yet? Did you watch it yet?" And I'm like, "Wait, what are you talking about?"
That's
so I watched it just like a minute, and I messaged you immediately. I was like, dude, come on the show, and you were nice enough to say, yes, I will come on the show. That was very kind of you.
No, thank you. Thank you. This is my first podcast, and it's quite an eye-opener, really.
In what way?
It's,
as in what not to do?
No, not at all. No, I mean,
Cautionary tale.
right. Everything I do on social media it's not as interactive as this. This is literally one-on-one. And in social media, you're answering a question
or 3-on-1, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, that's right. This is far more intimate, and it's an eye-opener, and it's refreshing.
Well, good, because that's what the podcast was conceived to do, was to have an interaction and be intimate and sit around the campfire and talk about Land Rovers.
Absolutely.
I think we've achieved that on this episode.
Yeah, only without the flames.
Yeah, flames actually in this case would be bad. Yeah,
bring your own flames and ignite them where you wish.
Thomas, thanks very much for coming on, talking with us today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
That's the podcast for September 2019, New Defender Reveal Month. It will forever be known as September 2019. Thanks to Thomas Enston of Land Rover Photo Album for talking about the new Defender and his experience with it. If you haven't been to his Instagram and to check out his photos, you need to do that. And also check out his YouTube page for his videos. That 2-hour, 15-minute, and 50-second video is it's a love letter to Defender, and I think you'll enjoy it if you're a Defender enthusiast of any persuasion. Did you guys, both of you've seen it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to you two for coming on the show and helping out today and giving us your thoughts on the new Defender in particular. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, as always.
And thanks to the One True Packs for his continued production support. Visit our website, centresteer.com, to listen to previous shows and for show notes, which have links to stories discussed on today's show. We're part of the 4x4 Radio Network, and I invite you to check out the other 4x4 related shows at 4x4radionetwork.com. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can directly support the show at patreon.com/centersteer. You can show your support for the podcast with a t-shirt or a sticker. Click on store on top of the menu of our webpage, and you'll get all the details there. Or come to Mar. If you're at Mar, I'll have shirts for sale and stickers. If you're not a subscriber to the show, please do so to get the show automatically delivered when it is released. Also, go out and rate the podcast. It'll help others discover the show. Go out to iTunes or Overcast or Stitcher, wherever it may be, and give us a review, especially if it's a good one. We'd appreciate it. And is your kid a Land Rover fanatic? We'd like to talk to them. Email us at messages@centresteer.com with the subject line Rover Kids, and we'll schedule a time to talk with them via Skype or a phone call, or you can send us in a recording. But before you send the recording in, give me a shout out so I know you're working on it. I can give you some guidance. Thanks for listening to the show. We hope you enjoyed show number 78, New Defender Reveal Month. Next month, really next month. I bumped them from this month because we got Thomas at the last minute to talk to us. But next month, a Canadian couple buy a Defender sight unseen in overland Europe. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover. Until next time, I ask you to share the show with one other Land Rover enthusiast.
You may now resume your important things. What? You're still here? It's over. Go home.